Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for not just another episode of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective, but the final episode, of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. And we are here today to do our very special top 10 Steven Spielberg ranking video. A fairly new video series. We've done a couple of now. Very different to other ranking videos you've seen, and we'll get into all of that. But before we do, Tate, how are we doing tonight?
Yes, doing very good. Looking forward to finally closing off the Steven Spielberg retrospective. Well, kind of. We've still got Fabelmans to come. But looking to tie off all of the other films and just see how everyone else ranks their Spielberg films and where they place the different films across his entire film catalogue.
Definitely that. It's going to be really interesting tonight. I've got the benefit of hindsight. I know everyone's scores, results, who we've submitted in, who we've not. I'm going to go over all the rules for people that might not have seen one of these ranking videos before. We've done the MCU, the Infinity Saga now. We've done James Bond. We've done Star Wars. And the Spielberg films are our fourth one of our official ranking system. So I think we found our niche. And our niche is that they're very long. But we're hoping it's not too long for everyone because this director's done 34 films. So it's a lot more varied. I'm just going to say that immediately. But before we start getting into that, I want to hear from everybody at home. So please do comment below with your favorite Steven Spielberg film. Now, I'm going to do what I have done for the Bond and Avengers videos. If you go on our Twitter, not just apply it to Twitter, go comment on the video that would have said this we're live or premiering, or drop us a DM. Comment or send me your top 10 and I will make it into an artwork design if you want to do that, like we have done in the past. So I'm just going to get that away because I will forget otherwise. And I'm more than happy to do that for people that, have jumped in and been commenting along throughout, I say the entire year. This is it. This is like 8 months plus. We began this the week of the Oscars. And here we are talking about next year's Oscars, especially the film fizz we can't speak about yet because it's not out in the UK, which is out tomorrow in the US, which timed very well for those having their Thanksgiving. But aside from commenting and subscribing and all the other stuff, Tate, where can the people find us for other videos and what is coming up?
The people can find us on both Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy. You can find us on Facebook and Letterboxd. Just type in Cinema Savvy or go to link in the description. Or you can find us on redbubble.com. Link is in the description as well. Pick up some merch, help out the channel in that way.
Definitely. So everybody, please do get involved. And what we'll do before we start explaining it. So the concept of these videos, a lot of people every person that sent a video tonight that's going to get played has been on an episode of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. They submit their top 10. Now, the top 10 is a very loose term. It can be their favorite films. It can be the films they think are the best. It can be the films that they think is the most personal to them. We do not set specific rules for these top 10 videos. And then we use the F1 point system to combine them together. So whatever ranks first place gets 25 points, second place 18, third place 15, fourth place 12, fifth place 10, sixth place 8, seventh place 6, eighth place 4, ninth place 2, 10th place gets 1 point. No faster slap points. But that's the score we use. And the reason we do is that it gives a real incentive to your 1, 2, and 3 that it's not just about having low scores and grouping it. What you love the most or what you enjoy the most gets this extra bump from being your favorite or what you think is the best. And it's a really unique system that I've never seen film channels do. And this makes for a really interesting ranking system that some films that everyone loves will pop up, get very high points, and there might be some that don't as much. And I think what we're going to also explain is that when we finish going through all the videos, we'll then do a countdown from last place to first place with the point scores. But I just want to say, is what me and Tate said before we went live, this isn't indicative of how we view his career, how we view all of his films. The points come from the top 10. There were discussions about a top 15 that we just was too impractical to do on a video, too impractical to do for points. And there's so many wonderful films that might not have had the chance to shine tonight, but it is not indicative of any film's quality. The ranking is for the guests and the contributors and ourselves to talk about the 10 they enjoy / love. Again, it's quite open. And before I hand over to, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has submitted in videos. Tonight we're going to go through them all, and we'll do a proper thank you at the end of the video, which is the end of the series, which has gone on for 35 weeks at this point in time, which is insane. But yeah, Tate, how are you feeling before we start hitting play? Because you've not seen these. You're in the dark compared to me.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a lot easier from a picking perspective to have 15 votes or a top 15. It's one of those things where he has so many good quality films, Steven Spielberg, that it's very difficult to narrow down your favorite 10. And I know there was a lot left off of the list, for myself at least, that I was looking at and going, I can't put it in my top 10, but God, it needs to be on my list and stuff like that. So I'm sure I'll do a letterboxd list afterwards with my full kind of ranking of where they would end up. But at least for what everyone has submitted tonight, this is their definitive top 10, or what they would pick as their definitive top 10, like order of films from Steven Spielberg. So I guess we will go straight into it with our first guest.
Absolutely. And before we bring up Tom Woods' video, we missed him last time on the post because he was ill. He is better, which is great. Very awkward recording moments because we had like 3 videos in 4 days. But you mentioned Letterboxd. Follow our personal accounts. I'll probably tweet them. That's a reminder to myself when I'm editing to tweet them. And me and you are going to have our own lists of all of them. So we've both been ranking them each week individually. I know you're quite new to Letterboxd.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make my list public on my account, so that will be there. Just in case anyone's curious about what we think of 11 to 34.
I'll do mine as well.
Definitely. And with further ado, we're going to jump over with our first one with Tom Woods.
This was an incredibly hard list to order and pick. I'd argue that there have only really been 2 bad Spielberg films, and the majority of his filmography deserved rightly to be on this list. But, I had to look at what I enjoyed the most and what I kept coming back to. So here is my top 10 list of my favourite Spielberg films. At number 10, we have War of the Worlds. It may not be the film that people think of as peak Spielberg, but I love it. Yes, its second half isn't as good as its first, but I enjoy it nonetheless, and it is one of Spielberg's most underappreciated films. At number 9, we have Minority Report. I'll echo what I said at the end of the review for the film. It's great. At number 8 is Duel. This is a great, tense, spine-chilling thriller built on paranoia and fear. Even if it is only a TV film, it really showcases Spielberg's strengths and talents, and if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. At number 7 is Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a film about obsession and recapturing your childhood as an adult. This is a great film with an interesting premise and payoff. It's a great spectacle, and again, if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. At number 6 is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Whilst this isn't probably the best indie film, this is definitely my favourite, and one that I'll always come back to, and one that always comes to mind when I think of Indiana Jones. At number 5 is Schindler's List. This was incredibly tough to talk about during the review, but wow, this was, and is a fantastic work of art. It's haunting, it's melancholic, and it's really traumatic to watch, but, it's really, really good. At number 4, we have Empire of the Sun. As mentioned in the review, gave a little bit of a spoiler. It sits near the very top of my list, and with good reason. It's great, and I love it. There isn't really much else to say, and if you want to hear me gush about it for about an hour and a half, go check out the review for that one. Number 3, we have AI, Artificial Intelligence. Like many of Spielberg's films, the themes come back to innocence and childhood naivety, and instead of these narrative beats coming from the perspective of a human child, we get them from an artificial creation that imitates. a child. It's a wonderful film that, you know, deals with loss, and its final half an hour is truly magnificent. It is understated how good its last half an hour is. But a little confession: this was actually lower on my list originally, but when writing these brief summaries and my brief thoughts, I really stopped to think about its place. And again, it was much lower, but having thought about it, it sits at number 3. I really do think it's that good. Number 2 is Jurassic Park. You can't have a Spielberg top 10 list without including Jurassic Park somewhere on it. For me, it is one of his best films. You know, it tackles man's hubris through the lens of someone essentially trying to recapture their childhood, and this is a theme that comes back multiple times over Spielberg's career. This recapturing of childhood and wanting to, you know, in the film itself, wanting everyone to feel the same amazement and wonder that they do for these fascinating creatures. It's scary, exhilarating, and as near perfect a Spielberg film as you can get. Which brings us on to number 1. It's an obvious pick. It's Jaws. Jaws takes the top spot, which, you know, you may roll your eyes at, but it's an obvious pick for a reason. It's about as perfect as you can get. It's brutal, thrilling, and it's Spielberg flexing his directorial muscles. Yeah, what else can I say apart from it's perfection?
Absolutely fascinating list. Thank you ever so much, Tom. I was actually intrigued by your pick of Empire of the Sun at number 4. I thought you would have it higher because I've had chats with you before about how much you love that film. So I was really shocked that wasn't in the top 3. I thought that if there was anything to bet on out of anyone's picks, it was, okay, Empire of the Sun's going to be top 3. So that actually surprised me. So it's nice to see something, you know, shocking me straight out of the gate. Was there anything that stood out for you there, George?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring it back up on the screen. Number 3, getting AI, I mean, we had an amazing discussion on the video, not just Tom Woods, Tom Pickup as well. And I'd never seen the film. But when me and Tom were talking after he sent his video into me, he said they ended up going so much higher on the list. And I was kind of having these thoughts, and as a sign of what's to come tonight, there's a lot of people that I just love hearing some of the films that really high up that you just wouldn't expect or wouldn't be accustomed to seeing. And I love how people are going to speak about it, but AI popping up quite high very early on as well. It sets for an interesting, and then I guess you've got the 1-2 power play of Jurassic Park and Jaws, which is going to be it's going to be very interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to see what else pops up. We've got Indiana Jones, and yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And kind of following on from Tom, we're going to move into our number 2. So we're delighted to be having Paul Klein back on the channel with us. He's recorded video sent in. I'm going to play it one out for you.
Hey guys, it's Paul Klein. I'm going to be giving my top 10 Steven Spielberg movies for Cinema Savvy. At number 10, it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I know it's not maybe the best thought of the Indiana Jones movies. Most people probably go Raiders or Last Crusade, but for me, as a kid, I liked it. It's the darkest, it's the weirdest. I've always really enjoyed the random bit where they're in the cart going around the place. I think it's brilliant. Number 9, Munich. Bit different, part of his 9/11 trilogy, as I put it, and I think just a really different kind of film from him, one that isn't as optimistic as his other things. Yeah, just a dark, serious-minded movie about, you know, the futility of looking for revenge and, you know, true life events, but done with this really angry sensibility. Number 8, Amistad. I think Amistad is an underrated film. Jaimon Honsu is fantastic in the leading role, should have been Oscar nominated, wasn't. I think the supporting cast, Morgan Freeman, you know, Matthew McConaughey, Pete Postlethwaite, obviously Anthony Hopkins are all fantastic. And I think the John Williams score is one of his best with Spielberg, actually. Number 7, The Terminal. I love the Williams soundtrack. I love Tom Hanks's effortless, goofy charm as Victor Navorsky. I think the supporting cast are all great, especially Stanley Tucci. I think it's a really adorable film, and I think it's got a lightness of touch I enjoy. Number 6, Hook. This is probably one that people won't agree with the most, but as a kid I loved Hook, and then showing my own kid Hook is a great joy. I think maybe there are missteps in it, but I kind of think the missteps are what make it great, and I really enjoy it. Number 5, War of the Worlds. I spoke at length about it on the show. I think it's a great meditation on 9/11. I think it's Tom Cruise's last proper great movie performance before he became just Tom Cruise in. And I think it's really good. Number 4, Jaws. Jaws is like one of the greatest movies ever made, so it was obviously going to be there somewhere. The score, again, great. I really love Roy Scheider's performance. I love Richard Dreyfuss. I love, just for me, the whole film's encapsulated in that moment when the young boy copies what Roy Scheider's character's doing, and then he says, "Give me a kiss." Why? Because I need it, and it kind of spurs him to fight the shark, and it's got a big shark in it, so it's all good. Number 3, Minority Report. Might be weird to be this high up for some people, but for me, I think it's gross. I think it's got a great supporting cast. Again, a good Tom Cruise performance. Again, dark and weird and filled with all this weird stuff in it that you wouldn't expect from a Steven Spielberg movie. I think it's really underrated. Number 2, Schindler's List. That theme by John Williams is one of the best pieces of music ever written in history, in my opinion. Liam Neeson, Ralph Fiennes, and Ben Kingsley are like a perfect trio in it. I think that final scene of the actual Schindler Jews putting the stones on his grave, and then you just see the silhouette putting a rose down, is one of the most beautiful things put to cinema. I think it is a perfect film. And number 1, Jurassic Park. I was on the show for Jurassic Park. I love Jurassic Park. Sam Neill is great. Laura Dern's great. Richard Attenborough's great. Jeff Goldblum. There's nothing about it I don't like. Every single thing about it works. It's the film that made me love film. It's perfect. It's the perfect blockbuster. It's the perfect, slightly scary family film. Nothing about it has aged poorly, in my opinion. I think everything works. I cannot sing its praises enough. Number 1, always Jurassic Park. And thanks for having me on for several episodes to talk at length. And thanks for letting me do this top 10 as well.
Well, thank you ever so much, Paul, for your list. What an interesting list. Going with the dark and weird approach to a lot of the films. I'm liking that. I know that his kind of style of films changed over the years, and he did have a lot of dark and weird films over time. The fact you zeroed in on that and went for those ones, primarily having Minority Report quite high up in your list, and that kind of theme of the film running throughout your entire top there. It's nice. I really enjoyed it, and I actually really agree with that list quite well.
No, same here. I'm a massive fan of Minority Report. I know Paul would join us for that one as well, and just seeing it pop up in the top 3, something I just didn't expect today. So I'm buzzing that we had it two entries in, and even War of the Worlds getting some love as well. Which War of the Worlds is a very fascinating one. I know I've just pulled out the 2 Tom Cruise ones, but it's a film that I feel has had an up and down, decade or two. Well, 17 years essentially now. And I think there's been a resurgence of kinds. I think there's been some terrible adaptations since that a lot of people look back on 05 more fond on now. But yeah, thank you again, Paul, for that. And next up, we're bringing back Ed Dollista, who, of course, runs the indie casts which is, of course, about Indiana Jones, that joined us as Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they were delighted for him to be able to send it in from Australia.
Hi, this is Ed Dollista from the IndieCast and one half of Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. Thanks so much for having me on your show, talking about the top 10 Steven Spielberg films. This was a tough list, I've got to say, and I'm sure depending on different times of the day or even the year or what have you, you know, it changes. But here we go, and I won't go into too much detail, but I'm sure there's probably no surprises on here, given if you look around my room anyway, or if you know me a little bit, you'll know exactly what I am talking about. But at number 10, I've got War of the Worlds. Now, I remember this film coming out and it gave me knots in the stomach, especially that opening sequence with Tom Cruise running away from the aliens with regards to the bridge twisting and people getting pulverized. It just really freaked me out. And whenever that's on TV, that's a movie I have to watch. So War of the Worlds is at number 10. Number 9 is one of his early works, and technically it's a telemovie, I guess, but it was released here in Australia as a movie, and it is Duel, and it is an amazing film if you haven't seen it, with Dennis Weaver against a truck, basically, and it is tense. It's a masterclass in a thriller, and I can thoroughly recommend it. And number 8 is Jurassic Park. I remember seeing this in the cinemas and being blown away like many people. Like with Star Wars, when we first saw that Star Destroyer going overhead, seeing those computer-generated dinosaurs. I didn't even know what computer-generated imagery was, but I was absolutely blown away by that movie. And, of course, all the merchandising that came afterwards. But Jurassic Park is still the original and is still the best. And number 7 is Jaws. A no-brainer, a fantastic thriller with another, you know, obviously John Williams is intertwined through so many of Steven Spielberg's productions, but the storytelling, the necessity of Bruce, you know, breaking down so they couldn't show the shark that much, which worked in the favor of the production. Just a all-round taut, scary horror thriller, and I love it. Jaws. Number 6 is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And hey, okay, I know there are naysayers out there for that film, but for me, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it got me into creating the IndieCast. And I just remember the excitement that was going on with regards to that. And I know that somewhere Indiana Jones 5 is going to be probably on this list if you ever revisit this top 10 Steven. Oh, no, I won't, because he's not directing it. Oh, my God, that feels so weird to say that, doesn't it? But anyway, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I really enjoy it. There's some, you know, hokey moments, but there's a cracker of an opening in the warehouse, and there's some great moments, and I'm enjoying it, and it's at number 6. At number 5 for me is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I remember taking 2 girls to see this back in 1982, and I really loved this movie. It just was that slice of life, and I was Henry. I was around that time. I was Henry Thomas, you know, being Elliot, playing with the Star Wars toys, and I wanted my own alien. Who didn't? So that's E.T. at number 5, and again, a cracker of a John Williams score to accompany that. At number 4, Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984. I love this film. I had it a little bit ruined for me because I had an American friend who came over to watch it with me at the cinema, and he had seen it, and he kept telling me, oh, this is happening. Oh, this is coming up next. But it was still a cracker of a movie. What's not to love in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? And I've got to say that that minecart chase, I still remember in the cinema where they're going over the edge of the minecart and Willie Scott just screams and you could hear a pin drop in the cinema. It was just action from, you know, woe to go. Amazing things. At number 3, we've got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Again, a wonderful film. I remember taking my dad to see that, and I remember connecting with him. And I saw that every week for maybe 11 weeks in the cinema. Every weekend I would go to see Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade. And, you know, you've just got that wonderful story of father and son, and what we thought was going to be the end of the Indiana Jones franchise as they, you know, rode off into the sunset. But it is a wonderful movie. great action sequences, a good villain, and also, just that wonderful chemistry between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. At number 2, I've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I remember watching this so I saw it in the movies in 77, and it came on TV probably late 79, late 80 in Australia. It was a hot summer night, and we were watching it. In those days, you could have all the windows open. The crickets were in the background, and someone put a firecracker in our letterbox, and it absolutely creeped. I just thought, oh my God, the aliens are coming. And I just really enjoy that movie. I think I like about it is the naturalism of the storytelling, the suburban setting, and also I think it's the first time I saw in a movie where, characters would talk over each other, and it was very real. Especially, I love that scene with the air traffic controllers reporting a UFO. I think that was a pretty tense scene where people are just talking over each other, staring at a radar dish. But it's again a really intense, atmospheric movie, and again that John Williams score, helps take it over the edge. And at number 1, there's no doubt it's got to be Raiders of the Lost Ark, my favorite Steven Spielberg film. What's to say? It's the perfect action adventure movie. Perfect casting, perfect direction, perfect effects, perfect score. What's not to like? And of course, you can, see me talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark on this show, or of course on the IndieCast every other week, or of course on Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure, where we devote a whole episode to that as well. And again, it's a classic. What's not to love about Raiders of the Lost Ark? I know that was pretty brief, but hopefully that got a bit of a taste of what I like. And I'm sure people are going, how can you haven't got Hook or Warhorse or Schindler's List, or but these are mine that connected with me, and I'm sure everyone else has got their own favorites. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show, and back to you.
Thank you ever so much, Ed, for coming on all the way from Australia. It was so nice to have you on and just talk about your passion, which is not only just Indiana Jones, but also, talking about other Spielberg films as well. And very nice balanced list. We expected the Indiana Jones to be in there. We know how passionate you are about it. But also hearing you talk about Close Encounters and seeing that in the cinema yourself, and just talking about your different cinematic experiences with these different films. It's a very unique perspective that we don't quite have on this list. So thank you for giving us with that insight.
Definitely, and I really want to quickly bring up Duel. I know that Tom Woods had it on as well, but I'm loving it's getting some shout outs because it was the very first one, and I think it's a film that unless you've seen it, you really struggle to appreciate it. That I think it is genuinely, it's not a good film because Spielberg did it. It is very much that's a better film than what most directors could do, and it was his first one, and it was a TV film, which is just a concept we don't really get anymore. But moving on from Ed, we have another Tom in the studio. And at this time, we're bringing back Tom Butler from James Bond A to Z podcast.
Hi guys, Tom Butler here from the James Bond A to Z podcast. And I'm here to share with you my top 10 Steven Spielberg films following your retrospective. I've gone with my personal favourites rather than the ones that I think are technically the best. But I hope you enjoy my list and I hope it helps. Number 10, I've gone with West Side Story, Steven Spielberg's first ever musical. I feel like he absolutely nailed it on his first attempt. Just an absolute brilliant piece of cinema. Number 9, I've gone with E.T., The Extraterrestrial. This film is 40 years old, but still manages to surprise and delight audiences. And it is just a brilliant piece of filmmaking. Number 8, I've gone with Temple of Doom, the second Indiana Jones film. Probably not one of Steven Spielberg's favourites, but definitely one of mine. I love its darkness, I love its weird energy, and that's why I've chosen it here. Number 7, I've gone with Close Encounters, an early Spielberg film in his canon, but again, one of my favourites. I love the stuff with the aliens on the mountaintop. So just think it's a fantastic movie. Number 6, I've gone with Saving Private Ryan, still Steven Spielberg's war movie. Again, this is a movie that changed the way that movies, our war movies, are made. and that opening sequence has just never been bettered. Number 5, different type of war movie, Schindler's List. Obviously a very important movie, but rightly so. It's an incredible achievement, a very bold move from Spielberg, and one of his finest pieces of work. Number 4, I've gone with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is personally a big favourite of mine. I came on the show to talk about it. And it's got everything you want from an action movie. It's fun, it's funny, it's got great performances without, and it's all character-driven stuff. So yeah, I love that one. And then number 3, I've gone with Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones movie. This is the action movie template, really, of the era. It's a fast-moving, thrilling adventure movie with a terrific lead performance from Harrison Ford. So yeah, I've gone with that for number 3. So at number 2, I've gone with Jaws. This is just one of the all-time greatest movies ever made. Scary, funny, and also character-driven as well. Just one of the all-time great movies. So at number 1, I've gone with Jurassic Park, my personal favourite movie of all time. I've watched this movie so many times. I've enjoyed it in every different format it's come out in. And I just think it's Spielberg really operating at the very top of his game. So that's my list. I hope it comes in handy. I look forward to hearing what everyone else has chosen. And yeah, whatever you guys get up to next, I hope I can get involved again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tom, for your list. Very interesting. So me and George, we've been kind of discussing over the entire course of the Steven Spielberg retrospective, these 7, we'd say, core films of his filmography. So that would be Jurassic Park, Jaws, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, Indiana Jones, E.T., and
Close Encounters.
Close Encounters. The core 7 films that we'd said, like, throughout his entire career, these are kind of his milestones and points where you can definitely kind of point to go, yeah, those are the classics. And of course, during these top 10 rankings, we're picking, we're not going to pick these 7. We're just going to pick ones that, are our favorites. But this is the first one where we would say all of the 7 are included, the 7 classics, the ones that universally everyone will have some kind of, respect or attachment to as his best films of all time. Within our lists, we kind of mix them around in different orders, and, we throw in other films because it's a top 10 list, or even we replace some because we have personal connections to other films included in there, just like what Tom said with his personal connection to Jurassic Park being his favorite film of all time, let alone talking about the Steven Spielberg retrospective. So it's really interesting that we have our first list that has all of the classics involved in it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the term classics is a weird one because I think he's made so many more than 7 classics, just in case anyone's furious. But the thing with me is, it's when we look at his career, they're the films that are like chapters in their own right. Like, Jaws was the film, and then Close Encounters and Raiders, and whether they were his Oscar wins or they were the highest box office wins of all time, or the films that put him on the map, we sort of isolated it down to this core list of 7. Maybe next year Fabelmans will make it an 8, because if it wins best film or best director, then it has to make that list. And it's really interesting that, it's something me and you're very conscious about and we've spoke about a lot. And yeah, it's lovely to get Tom Butler back on. I know we did a great video on Last Crusade, and I do know that Jurassic Park's his favorite from all time. So I was like, yeah, we'll get you on, Tom. I know what your number 1 is, and I just West Side Story getting some love as well.
Yes.
That's the last. We did that last week to plug last week's video, which was a really good discussion. And it's not a spoiler, but it doesn't make my list by 1 place, which is really frustrating. But again, this is why we spoke about a 15, but it's just, it would have been hard. But yeah. Moving on from the second Tom into the third Tom, we of course have Tom Pickup, who joined us for AI and Hook, and we're going to play his now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tom Pickup from Really 007, and this is my contribution to the Spielberg Top 10. Now, it's a very, very difficult task, as I'm sure pretty much everyone will have found. The list of films is incredible. All 35 so far have been brilliant in their own ways, in their own individual ways, but we have to name 10. And there's 2 in particular that didn't make it, but I just want to give them a shout out. And those are E.T., which I know sounds ridiculous that hasn't made it, but it's such an amazing film. I thought it would get a lot of love anyway. And the other one is The Terminal, which I think is a stunning film. It's one of my coziest films to watch. It's just before Christmas. You can get it watched just before the Advent season begins. And I think Tom Hanks and Stanley Tucci are magnificent in it. But the top 10, I'll start by 10. A labour of love for me is War Horse. Now, some people don't really rate this film. It did get a bit of Oscar buzz. It got a few nominations. And even myself, I wasn't perhaps massively keen on it as I was watching it. But the more and more I thought about it, I thought it was so well made. And I haven't seen the play. And I know everybody who's seen the play doesn't tend to like the film. But I think as a film in its own right, it really pulls the heartstrings and it's a cracker. At 9, I'm going to put Minority Report. The guy's a joke. I mean, this must be one of the best sci-fi films ever made. And a lot of those sci-fi films, of course, were much earlier, 70s, 80s, the pioneers of that, such as Stanley Kubrick. But this is coming after that and still finding something so original. And Tom Cruise is perfect in the lead role. At number 8, I've put Saving Private Ryan. It's another one where people tend to just concentrate on the first half an hour, which is unbelievable. But after that, I think it's a really solid film. And by the end of it, I think it's so moving. And again, people don't really sort of focus on that. It's a really well-told story. And Spielberg rightly won Best Director at the Oscars for it. At number 7, and again, this could be number 1, but I thought, I know it's going to get an awful lot of love. I put Jaws. I mean, there's, what else can I say? It's a perfect film, isn't it? I wouldn't change anything. And growing up watching this, it's one of those films where kids should watch it, but be scared by it, because it isn't anything that's going to mess with their heads. It's just going to scare them. And you're treated to the best filmmaking, the best performances ever. And I still think The Shark looks brilliant. At number 6, it's another one that is one of the best films ever made, in my opinion. Jurassic Park, the original, which I still think, I saw it recently, it stands up as well as it ever did. I remember watching it in America before it had come out in England, and it was just one of the best experiences of my life. The effects are fantastic, the story's really good, and again, Spielberg just creates amazing moments of tension, such as the bit in the car while they're, getting a bit scared and the water shakes. Magnificent. At number 5, I've gone for Schindler's List. I almost think it's become a bit overlooked in recent years because it's just seen as another Oscar winner type film, and it's much more than that. I think every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. I find it really moving, obviously. I think John Williams is at his best here. Liam Neeson, got nominated, but it just shows how good an actor he is. He isn't just a Jerry action guy. Okay, number 4. This is perhaps controversial. It's probably one of my favourite childhood films, and it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I just think it's absolutely brilliant. It's a proper matinee adventure film, and it's got, a few dodgy scenes that perhaps you'd change now, but it's just magnificent. It's so entertaining. It's really scary for kids, and there's just so much to enjoy. I love it. At number 3, I reviewed it for Cinema Savvy with George and Sam. It's Hook. People will laugh at that, but I think it's possibly one of the most magical films I've ever seen. It gets me every time. I don't know why Spielberg doesn't love it so much himself, but I think you're transported into Neverland. And the music, this is John Williams at his best, the songs, and yeah, I think it really is underrated. And Robin Williams is a genius. I love him. At number 2, just about number 2, I doubt anyone will put this high, but it's AI, artificial intelligence. Now, I first saw this on video. I didn't see it at the cinema. Didn't really. Again, I don't really understand what it was. The marketing was probably a bit weird because it's very difficult to market. And watching it is a real experience. I think the first third is amongst the best of Spielberg's work. The middle third is messed up. And then the final third is incredibly moving, and I mentioned that in the episode. And the music from John Williams just seals this as a film that everybody should watch, and they need to perhaps watch it a few times because it messes with your head basically. But I love it. And number 1, I know people will wonder why I haven't chosen Raiders. I've chosen number 1 as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This film is is definitely in my top 10 films of all time, directed by anybody. I think it's the absolute peak of Spielberg. He knows exactly what he's doing. The prequel sort of bit, the flashbacks to when he was young, you're already intrigued. The Holy Grail story is just so good. Just meeting the knight at the end is one of the greatest moments in cinema history as he waves.
Thank you ever so much, Tom, for your list. Very interesting. Another person putting AI high up. I bet you didn't expect that, as you stated in the video. It's fascinating because it came out in such an unusual era for sci-fi. It's a more serious film, and it takes on very different tones to what you'd expect from that kind of, era of sci-fi and stuff. It's a very unusual film. I quite like it. I'm not going to spoil my list as to say whether it got on or not. But I do prefer other sci-fi films of that era. Doesn't take away from the fact that it is another fantastic Spielberg film. And with just the different spread of the films we've had so far on loads of people's lists, it's clear to see how good of a director he is. That, every single person's put the films in different orders, different films on the list.
Yeah.
A lot are getting involved, and it's so spread out. We're getting different things every single time, and different ones that are higher, different ones that are lower. Like we said, with the categorizing almost the top 15, if we could, it's so tight at the top. It's unreal. I'm sure we'll look at that when we get round to the rankings itself.
Yeah, I'm kind of some behind the scenes when I'm curious. Tom was the first one to send in his video, and I was so nervous. Like, is everyone going to have the same top 3, or is everyone going to have the same top 4? And I was like, is everyone going to have the same? And then it was like, boom, Hook and AI. I mean, Tate's about AI really well, but just Hook getting on the board. And I just want to kind of throw back to the actual AI review. And again, we've been doing this series for 8 months. And there's been some really eye-opening conversations in these reviews with a lot of different people. Again, the beauty of a series like this is the amount of people able to speak to, the amount of people that took time out to jump on. It is always appreciated, and the conversations we've been able to have about these films. I'd never seen it, so to get Tom Woods on, who had seen it before, wasn't sure, and Tom Pickup, who loved it, and me and Neutral, it made for such interesting balance. And I love the fact it's high up, and I like those. I think I've kind of said it to you before, and I think a lot of people say it, that there will always be a more immaculate respect for a completely original concept than necessary. Not to diss on sequels, prequels, etc., or franchises, but when someone comes out of a really insane idea and that film makes itself to the big screen, I think that's always something to be respected, especially someone of Spielberg's caliber who can make whatever film he wants in the world, and he would still make, back to back like AI and Minority Report, which is insane. But moving on from Mr. Pickup, we have, of course, Cam, who sent in from Spy Hards, who's joined us for a fair few all across the series.
Hello, Cinema Savvy viewers. I'm Cam from the Spy Hards podcast, and here's my Spielberg top 10. Number 10, War of the Worlds. The post 9/11 atmosphere and just sci-fi horror thrills of this one really work for me. The sequence on the ferry, for example, whenever I watch this, it's like that's the reason that's on my top 10. I'm just gripped by it. The ending of the movie is why it is my 10 and not any higher. Number 9 is Catch Me If You Can. Just infectiously fun, huge caper energy, and I love the work of DiCaprio, Hanks, and Christopher Walken in the movie. Number 8, Temple of Doom. Very controversial pick, probably. The racial elements have aged very poorly. The Willie Scott character, great concept, poorly executed, but the movie is like the funhouse ride from hell, where you're just like, get on this coaster and strap yourself in and go on beginning to end, just an endless series of incredible set pieces. I love the supernatural dark energy of this one, and I like that it is an indie sequel trying things different. It's the most interesting indie sequel for that reason, unlike, Last Crusade I love, but it is a retread of Raiders, as is Skulls. So yeah, for me, this one ranks very high, and I think had it been more embraced, we might have gotten, say, that indie haunted house movie that they were developing, which could have been pretty cool. Number 7, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is just sci-fi majesty. If I can ever see this like in a theater with like an orchestra, playing John Williams' majestic score, I'm done. I got nothing left to achieve in life. I'm out. See you later. Number 6, Schindler's List. What do you say about Schindler's List? This is just a towering work that is not very rewatchable because it is just a despairing, exhausting, haunting, depiction of the Holocaust as it needs to be an, honest depiction of the Holocaust. But for that reason, when I'm making a favorites list, it doesn't rank that high because it takes me about 10 years between viewings. Whereas like this is a movie that, if it's an all-time, important films, it's up there. But yeah, that kind of holds it back. Number 5, E.T. The kid on the bike. I'm wearing the shirt right now, as you can see. But this one just works on so many different levels. Kids can see it as a story of, a childhood friend and saying goodbye at the end. Adults can see it as like the end of childhood entering into adulthood. Profound and in an unpretentious way. Raiders of the Lost Ark is my number 4. This is just, I've compared it on Spy Hard to Goldfinger. It's just a perfect vehicle for thrills and action. It is just on rails for 2 hours, and it does what Star Wars does. It takes the concept of serials and that type of storytelling and just elevates it to a level that very few can match. Number 3, Saving Private Ryan. Spielberg really earned that Oscar for the D-Day sequence, but to me the whole story is so compelling, and I'm drawn in by the character dynamics so much that even though it's grisly and often very upsetting, I find it incredibly rewatchable for that reason. Number 2, Jurassic Park. I remember seeing this movie in theaters with my grandfather and turning to him at the end and saying, how did they make the dinosaurs come to life? And he said, I have no idea. This movie's a miracle. Dinosaurs truly came to life in this movie. No Jurassic Park movie could ever replicate this or anything else for that matter. And for that reason, it's, I'll watch this movie countless times before the end of the road. And my number 1, my most rewatched Spielberg movie, can be summed up in one word. Always. Wait, no, sorry. Jaws. If you heard me talk about this movie on the Cinema Savvy episode, I love it to death. I think it is Spielberg's masterpiece. It has it all. Thrills, character-driven drama, a lot of laughs. Perfect movie. There's nothing better. So that's my top 10. Back to you, Cinema Savvy.
Thank you, Cam. My God, I thought you'd actually picked Always for a second. You had me there for a minute. I want to actually pull up, because we discussed it a little bit earlier, the seven classics. And if you have a look at his list, if you look from Close Encounters all the way across, all the way up to number 1, that is the 7. That is the classic 7. So our theory stands. Cam, that list is probably how most Spielberg fans would show. I'm going to bring it back up again. That is probably one of the most solid lists up against, Spielberg fans. Or if you ask kind of people, what is your favorite Spielberg films, just randomly, they'd probably go with those kind of films picked out there as a classic. So that is probably the most solid list that we've had so far. Fantastic.
Yeah, they're certainly the ones that, if someone was going to tell you, like, I'm going to watch 10 films of his, no more, no less, it will be 10. 7, that is 7 of the 10 that it's going to be. That doesn't mean it's on our ranking of it's in the top 10, but it's that logic of if you really do this down his career, look into it, they're the ones that really jump out from personal, professional, and just love seeing, I want to talk about Schindler's very quickly because we'll get to later on as well, but is what Cam said that, with this being his favorite films, you can't physically put it at number 1 in terms of enjoyment. No one ever will be able to, and it's more that respect position that comes from it. And again, this is when we do these top 10s, we're not here to set rules and tell you you've got to do it in this way, do it in that way. This is for everyone to get involved and have a bit of fun, and we hope you're enjoying it at home. And following that, next up we are bringing back Jed, and I'm envious of his background.
Steven Spielberg has such a great career that it's really hard to narrow it down to just a top 10 of his films, but I've managed to get there eventually. So my number 10 is Bridge of Spies. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this one as much as I did going into it because I'm not such a fan of the Cold War and Cold War films, but I just thought Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance are both great, and Spielberg's done a really good job with this film. I thought it was excellent. My number 9 is Ready Player One. As a big fan of the book, I was a bit skeptical going into the film, especially since there are quite a lot of changes that Spielberg makes, but I think he does them for the better, and it really helps the film come into its own. whilst also retaining so much of the book and making it really great. So I just thought it was a really fun film. I enjoyed that, which was my number 9. Talking of fun films, my number 8, Catch Me If You Can. I think that's another really entertaining one. It's just really enjoyable to watch. DiCaprio's great in that one, as he is in most films, but it's just really fun to watch that one. It's just entertaining. I kind of want to go watch that again now. So my number 7 is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Again, it's a really great sci-fi film, and there's not really been many sci-fi films in a similar vein to it since, and it's just very different to a lot of other sci-fi films, and it's just so simple, but it's just really great, and that simplicity keeps it going throughout the whole way. My number 6 is Jurassic Park. What's not to love about seeing giant dinosaurs eating people and running around? Like, that's quite enjoyable, so that's why it's my number 6. It's a classic. My number 5, Minority Report, another Steven Spielberg sci-fi film, but I think it's a really great concept, and Spielberg brings it all to life really well. So again, really enjoyed that one. My number 4, 3, and 2, I'm going to sort of all group together, but sort of speak briefly about them all at the end. So number 4, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. 3, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I know that's a bit controversial, doing Temple of Doom better than Last Crusade. And then 2 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. All the Indiana Jones films are great, and it's really hard to separate them all. I think Raiders is clearly the best of them. And then I just really had a lot of fun with Temple of Doom, which is why I put it above Last Crusade, but there's not a lot in it between all of these 3. And then my number 1 is not Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that's sadly lower down, but my number 1 is Saving Private Ryan. I think just the first 20 minutes alone, it's incredible and just one of the greatest bits of cinema history. And then the fact that Spielberg keeps this up the whole way through the film. It's my favourite war film ever and one of my favourite films of all time. It's just a really gritty, realistic approach to the war film. And I think Steven Spielberg puts everything into it, and it really shows when you watch it. It's a really great film, which is why it's my favourite Steven Spielberg film, and I think the best film that he's done.
Thank you ever so much, Jed, for your top 10. Very aesthetically satisfying to have the 3 Indiana Jones films put together. But you couldn't put that 4th one in, could you? You couldn't put Crystal Skull there at number 5. I'm sure that's up for debate for anyone who is defending Crystal Skull till the absolute death. So, no, very interesting list. This was the first list, I think, that we haven't had Jaws in, which is very interesting. That was kind of the one thing that was standing out to me, but also the big thing of having all 3 of the Indiana Jones original trilogy stood next to each other on the list, leading up to the number 1, which was, of course, Saving Private Ryan.
First time Saving Private Ryan's been at the top of someone's list as well, which I absolutely love to see. And also for a couple of first timers, we got Bridge of Spies on the board alongside Ready Player One, which is interesting. Bridge of Spies is we had a great discussion on that, and I'm loving some of the more modern ones that pop up, because I think a lot of his film in the 10s, people not trash, but you're trying to go, it's not as good as he was. And you're like, no, he was as good as he was. It's just there's 1 or 2 films in there that people dislike. Yeah. But that being said, we're going to move on from Jed, and we're going to bring in Rhys from Rio's Positive POV.
What's going on, Cinema Savvy viewers? I'm Rio from Rio's Positive POV, here to give you my top 10 Spielberg films, starting with number 10, Ready Player One. I adore the virtual reality, the oasis that was created for this film. Personally, that's where I think humankind is going, so it was such a joy to see on screen. Hopefully we get as dope avatars as they had in this. And also, that Shining scene, chef's kiss, absolutely spectacular. Then at number 9, I have Warhorse, a technically superb film and a real heartstring puller. I was a massive fan of the play when it was on in the West End. So to see it put on the big screen was just such a joy for me personally to see. At number 8, I have E.T. E.T. is a childhood favourite of mine. Anytime I watch that film, it immediately brings me back to my childhood. I don't know how you can watch that film and not at the end of it just feel pure happiness. It is a cinematic fairy tale which truly stands the test of time. And how can you not love E.T.? I just don't know. Then at number 7, we have the Leonardo DiCaprio-led Catch Me If You Can. DiCaprio is magnificent in this film, as is the score from the GOAT, John Williams. Spielberg, John Williams, movie magic always. The pacing also is just superb. Coming in at number 6, I have Lincoln. I'll be honest, the reason I primarily love this film is because it stars Daniel Day-Lewis, who, in my opinion, is the single greatest actor to ever set foot on a movie set. He is just phenomenal in every single film he's in. And as Abraham Lincoln, he is amazing. Lincoln is, of course, a very compelling character as well. And Spielberg greatness is all over this. Then at number 5, I have Saving Private Ryan. Top 3 war film of all time. That opening scene on Omaha Beach is just unreal. Tom Hanks is marvelous, and this film just turns me into an emotional wreck every time I watch it, which is crazy because I watch it so many times. Top tip, do not watch Saving Private Ryan on a hangover because you will be crying buckets of tears. Coming in at number 4, I have The Color Purple. A film which shows the greatness of Spielberg, just shows he can make any different type of film and it will end up being brilliant. The cast in this from top to bottom, sublime. Anytime anyone asks me my favourite Spielberg films, this is one that always comes into my mind. It's very hard for me to put into words, like it is with some films, why I love it so much, but I just adore this film. So that's why it has to be so high up on the list for me. Then at number 3, I have Schindler's List, which has 2 unreal performances with Ralph Fiennes and Liam Neeson. It is a magnificent film which tackles an extremely hard-hitting subject. It's more horror than 99% of any horror film ever made, and it just shows the greatness of Spielberg. Schindler's List is not one of those Spielberg films that I watch that often just because of the subject matter, but it's hard not to appreciate the brilliance that you see on screen anytime that you watch it. The runner-up at number 2, I have Jurassic Park, a true blockbuster, iconic, special effects and lifelike animations which were way ahead of their time. It's not just the dinosaurs that shine though, we have some extremely well-written human characters who are played to perfection by the cast. It's crazy that this film isn't number 1, but unfortunately there is the big beast that does have to go at number 1. So without further ado, my favourite Spielberg film, number 1, Jaws. Cinematic perfection. If you want to hear me gush about this film, there is a video on this Spielberg run on the Cinema Savvy channel. Watch that video, I'll give a full breakdown of why I love it, but it's just iconic. It's the score from John Williams, it's the zoom dolly shot, it's the suspense created. There's just so much to love about Jaws, and it's one of my all-time favourite films and my favourite Spielberg film. I'm Rio, peace out.
Thank you, Rhys, for your list. Very varied. That was, yeah, I was surprised by the fact that there was some films in there which we hadn't actually heard yet this evening. So we have Warhorse coming in, we have The Color Purple coming in, and also we have Lincoln. A very interesting list in the fact that there are those, I would say, niche films, still fantastic films in their own rights, but ones that aren't often talked about as much. It just shows how kind of deep his catalogue goes as far as films. And like you were saying about The Color Purple, like it shows his variation of the films that he can make as a director.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned with Lincoln, I mean Daniel Day-Lewis. I know Rhys is a massive Daniel Day-Lewis fan. We've spoken online about it before, and I love that it got quite hurt because it's not a film that people have spoken about. But you can't take away from the performance in it, and I think with Daniel Day-Lewis, because he has this not aura, but he's if not the greatest actor that's as recent ever stepped foot on a set. And so some people, it's just him playing another role, but it was so perfectly cast for it. And yeah, it's a great list. And as we said earlier, we just love the variety of the people we're bringing on there. Everyone's got different backgrounds, and the film's different meaning for so many people. And it's just really interesting. And Jaws, at the top of the list again. It's creeping up there, and it's interesting. It seems like we're having a couple of films that are really jumping out, being at the top or second on a lot of them. But that being said, we're gonna head over to Charlie now.
Hi, here's my top 10 for the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. Starting at number 10 is the recently released and Academy Award nominated musical West Side Story. Just made the cut purely because I think it's one of his most rewatchable films of the last few years, and I'm a huge musical fan, so that made the list. Number 9, Saving Private Ryan. Should probably be higher up technically, but because I don't think I could watch it as often as some of the others, because it's so heavy and so graphic and so quite long, I put it in at number 9, but I didn't want it to get missed off the list. Number 8 is Catch Me If You Can, probably one of my most rewatched Spielberg films. I think it's a masterpiece, and is one of my favourite performances from both Tom Hanks and Leo, so that's in at number 8. Number 7, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Only watched it for the first time a few years ago, but as a sci-fi nerd and old school Spielberg fan, this definitely needed to make the list. Number 6, Jurassic Park: The Lost World. Not my favourite of the series, but obviously he only directed the first 2, and they're all brilliant, so that's come in at number 6. Number 5, Ready Player One, which I know is controversial because not a lot of people loved it, but as it's my favourite book and I have seen the film multiple times, I wanted it to get on the list, especially in the top 5. I think it's a really worthwhile adaptation, and I think for something completely different to anything Spielberg's done in the past, I think it's a brilliant film. Number 4, I owe a lot to this film because it introduced me to one of my now favourite actors, Mark Rylance, is Bridge of Spies. I think it's one of the best war films made of recent years. I think Tom Hanks gives an absolutely career best performance, and for an event that took place during a war that is less spoken about than some of the others, particularly things like Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List, I think it is just incredible. It's gritty, it's dark, it's encapsulating, it's just brilliant. Number 3 is Jaws. To be fair, my top 3 kind of could be in any order, and they're probably quite predictable, but for obvious reasons, Jaws is in there at number 3. Absolutely brilliant film, one of the best horror films ever made, some of the best physical effects ever done, so that's number 3. Number 2 is E.T. I've seen this film countless times. I absolutely adore it, and the score will always be one of my favourite scores from John Williams. And then taking the top spot is, of course, Jurassic Park. I think to this day is still one of the most incredible feats in filmmaking, and features that absolutely incredible score from John Williams. So there's my top 10.
Thank you ever so much, Charlie, for your list. Another very interesting list. Bridge of Spies getting a lot of love in there, a lot of love for Mark Rylance in general coming out from you. And also, very interesting, this is the highest we've had E.T. so far. We do consider it to be one of the classics of his catalogue, yet I feel like, and we've been discussing this throughout the video, possibly not as loved as it is in the UK as it may be in America, which is very fascinating. It has appeared, I think that is the highest it's been on any of the lists we've had so far. We'll see in the final few picks if anyone puts it any higher. But really, really interesting list. Thank you.
Yeah, and I love seeing Ready Player One getting some love as well. I know you're on the review, and I know Charlie loves the book and the film, and it's nice to see it pop up quite high. And West Side Story as well, getting a nod in there too with Charlie and her musical background. So it's another exciting top 10. And with that in mind, we're going to head on to the last one that's been submitted in. So we've got Dave next, and then it will be Tate, then myself. We'll go through ours on the stream. We're not pre-recording anything. We're not recording and going to play. We'll go through ours. We can have a little bit longer if we need to. But before we get to that, let's hear from Dave.
Hey everyone, and here it is. It's wonderful to be back again on Cinema Savvy, where you'll tend to find me just popping up always because that's what I do. They can't get rid of me. So yes, here it is, my Spielberg top 10. Starting with number 10, The Terminal. Spielberg, amazing. Hanks, great. Tucci, the best. It's a film that I love the setting of the airport. It makes me smile, it makes me happy. I love this film. It's number 10. At number 9, it's E.T., The Extraterrestrial, a film from my childhood, a film I have revisited many times, not without the guns and stuff like with the CG E.T., that's not the one you would watch, but this is that film that everyone kind of remembers from their childhood, and for me, it's the same. It's a great film still, it still holds up, even so far down the line, but yeah, for me, number 9, E.T. At number 8, we have Minority Report. Cruise, Spielberg, together forming this amazing, amazing movie. I love the whole premise of it. I love the way it's acted. I think the way it looks, really that dystopian sort of look around it, and this futuristic world is fantastic. So yeah, number 8, it is Minority Report. Number 7, Catch Me If You Can. I love this coming together again of Hanks in another Spielberg film. He seems to pop up a lot, and with Leonardo DiCaprio also playing in a real life sort of story. I love the presentation of it all. I love how it looks. I think Leonardo is amazing in this movie. The scene in the hotel room with the fake wallet, fantastic. So yeah, that is number 7, Catch Me If You Can. Number 6, it is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the film that gave us Indiana Jones, the film that made Harrison Ford, not a household name, but you know what? He was already Han Solo. And he also then gets this. And is there a bad word you can say about Raiders? It is an exceptional film. Amazing stunts, amazing performances. Just one of those films that you'll feel like if you watch through, Indiana Jones will stand out as being just the coolest guy in the world. And you know what? What's not to love about it? So yeah, number 6 was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Number 5, it is Saving Private Ryan, a film that blew me away the first time I saw it. Those opening 20 minutes, landing on the beach. I still don't think I've seen a film quite like that, to just make an audience sit in stunned silence when the credits finished, and it was just eerie. Yeah, it was an amazing film. I think the character work in it is exceptional. Spielberg, as always, directed to an absolute T. Number 5 on my list, Saving Private Ryan. Number 4, and it's another entry for Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford. It is, of course, The Kingdom of the Crystal. It's not Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You thought, no, it was never going to be. It is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. For me, a perfect film to round out a trilogy. It's the perfect finish to a trilogy movie. We're going to ignore that Crystal Skull nonsense for now. We'll see what Indy 5 does, but for now, this would have been a perfect ending, riding off into the sunset. What an exceptional film. Connery coming on board as Henry Sr., just chef's kiss. So yeah, number 4, Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade. Getting at the top 3, this is where it got really tricky, but number 3, it's Schindler's List. This for me is probably Spielberg's masterpiece, and then you say, it's his masterpiece, why didn't you put it number 1? It's a really bizarre reason that this is a film I've seen, and to all intents and purposes, I don't think I would ever revisit, given over the watch to. It's harrowing. It's a personal story for Spielberg, but it's something I've seen. I checked off the list. It's one of those films to see, and it's done. And I don't feel I ever need to put myself through watching that again. It's just one of those movies to kind of go, yeah, I've seen Schindler's List. It's amazing. It's so well made. It's Spielberg couldn't do much better than this. But because of the fact it's not something personally that I feel I would ever revisit, it stays at number 3. Number 2, it's Jurassic Park. And wow, Jurassic Park, the dawn of the CGI era, for good or for bad, for better, for worse, it did that. But with the use of also the props that they made, the full-scale T-Rex they made, a film that stands up today as well as it did when it came out. Some of the CGI looks a little bit like suspect if, blow your eyes a little bit, just close them a little bit. It looks absolutely fantastic. The story stands up. It's just an amazing, amazing movie, and it's really rides high for me up there. And I don't think it's could be uncrowned from its place at the top of this list. Although it's not top, it's number 2. That was Jurassic Park. Number 1 on my list, of course, leaves only one thing. Da-dun. Da-da-da! Jaws. Jaws is absolutely my number 1 in the Spielberg top 10 movies, according to Dave, which means nothing, I know. But so the first summer blockbuster, the movie that went out there and did it. It's a horror movie. It's funny. It's suspenseful. It's got a shark being blown up while it eats a lot of people. It's got the scene talking about all the other guys being eaten by sharks and the story that Hooper tells. It's incredible. Just the whole thing. Quint tells, not Hooper tells. Oh, look at that. I put it number 1. I get Jaws wrong. Stop getting Jaws wrong. Okay, that is it's fine. It's going to be okay. I'm sure George will edit the life out of this and it'll be absolutely fine. But yes, look, that was it. Number 1 with a bullet in the tube blowing up. It's Jaws. That's a top 10 Spielberg list.
Thank you ever so much, Dave. Always a pleasure to have you on the channel. And I want to say a very interesting late run from all of the lists that have been coming in for Catch Me If You Can. Very interesting that it's been getting a lot of traction. It's been kind of milling around, the mid-pack of a lot of people's lists. And there you go, right there at number 7, coming in, right next to Minority Report and The Terminal, films which are all kind of similar-ish era from Spielberg. It's more of the, not modern, but, that between the 90s and 2000s kind of Spielberg. Fantastic to see a lot of representation across all of the eras that we have, from his early work all the way through to his modern stuff as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to Catch Me If You Can, because those early noughties ones, like, I don't want to say hit his peaks, that's very disrespectful, but you had the 90s, which, like, Gargantuan, Schindler's List, you've had Jurassic Park, you've had Saving Private Ryan, and the early noughties are kind of like, he's in his 50s at this point, and it's like, I can kind of make what I want. And it's great. And they are great, and they're still great. And it's really interesting. Some of those projects you did take in the early noughties and doing the series as well on it. We know a lot of them had been in the pipeline for a long time, and there's no coincidence this is after DreamWorks opened as a studio, which he founded in the late 90s. So that's a real big thing. But no, it's always lovely to get Dave, and we'll do a special thank you to the 10 that sent in videos for this. We're going to do another thank you at the end for everybody. We, of course, couldn't get everybody's videos in, which is understandable. We had so many amazing guests throughout the year. But we're going to segue into the final 2 top 10s, which is myself and Tate. Tate, do you have your list ready?
I do have my list ready, and I'm going to go straight into it. At number 10 of my favorite Steven Spielberg films of all time, it is Bridge of Spies. This one, it caught me off guard. Not only the first time that I watched it, but upon rewatch and upon rewatch again, it's one of those films where I never expect it to be as good as it is, and then you watch it and you're like, wow, it's like rediscovering the magic of it every single time you go into it. And it's a brilliant, brutal Cold War drama. They make kind of, the lawyer business of, trading off spies or people, soldiers and stuff like that, to be the most intense thing put to film. And it's fantastic against the backdrop, against the scenery, against the direction, against everything. It's just one of his brilliant modern films, and it had to be in my top 10. It was my one that was like, it needs to go in there. I don't know where to put it, so I'm going to have to put it quite far down because of that. But at least it managed to get some representation in there. My number 9 is Duel. And this is more out of the fact that I remember just being kind of sat at home, summer holidays, or on days where I'm ill off school, flicking onto ITV4, and suddenly Duel's playing. And I don't know if it was always ITV4, it was one of the ITV channels like ITV2 or something like that, but I swear they play it like 3 times a year. I think it's one of those films where you can just flick on the TV and every now and then it'll be on. It is fantastic to see that this was his first, it was a TV movie, but everyone kind of sees it as, his first film, his breakout thing. Expertly shot for a person who has at the time, not the biggest amount of experience, brilliantly set up, and it's just an outright fantastic thriller from start to finish. My number 8 film is West Side Story. Now, as a massive lover of film musicals, as a massive lover of the original, we talked about it in our review. This film was 1 or 2 decisions away from being a top 3 film, easily. And this film makes its way onto the 8th spot of the list purely out of potential alone, because there are a few elements of the film which did not work. And if they did, it would be heralded as one of his greatest. I think we were talking about in the review, if you change those small little things, it would have won Best Picture easily. It would have swept the awards. It would be heralded as one of his greatest. So it's one of those where it just ever so slightly missed out. At number 7, we have a bit of tonal whiplash. We go straight to Saving Private Ryan, a film that is definitely not a musical, a film that is definitely not of any romance or anything like that. This film gets here alone just based off the opening sequence. Like, anything past that, you know, is just additional extra amazement that's added on. It is an absolute phenomenal film from start to finish. And I know a lot of people focus in on that opening sequence, but, you know, it was getting into the top 10 off that. It was just then placing it, where would it go? And that was based off the rest of the film, which is a fantastic war film, one of the greatest of all times. But I have personal preference towards the films that came above it, and different areas of respect for the films that came above it as well. So even though it is a fantastic film, and if we're ranking war films, it would absolutely be like echelons above. And when it comes to Spielberg films, he has such a deep catalogue that you just cannot rate it higher than where it is. So it's at number 7. At number 6, we have Jaws. Just a phenomenal thriller. It's just amazing. Every single time you revisit it, you notice something different. And this film's been studied to death. It was the first blockbuster. It was the first film to kind of, you know, bring in modern cinema to kind of the fandom of people going to a film based off word of mouth and stuff like that. You know, just everything involved in this film, from the acting, the direction, everything is just so alive and so fantastic and so energizing. You feel like you're on the edge of your seat, even if you're not sat down watching the film. That's the kind of effect that Spielberg had. And this was absolutely his, you know, his peak, I would say, in directing by far. Well, say that. We move on to number 5, Schindler's List. This isn't my favorite film, but this is easily his best film, if that's a good way of putting it. I can't put it any higher on this list purely out of enjoyment. This isn't a film that you're meant to enjoy. You can admire it for what it is and how it's shot and filmed, but the content and matter is so gut-wrenching and just so visceral and so difficult to watch. And I want to add, it must be watched. It absolutely needs to be watched. It's one of those films where you can happily say, if you've watched this once, that's completely fine. Respect to you for watching it. This is a kind of time capsule as to that era of history that was so brutal and violent and so wrong. And it's a film that absolutely needed to be made. And he made it with such expert and craft that I don't think any film could come close to kind of the levels that it went to ever again. It's the kind of, it's the one that you put forward in that respect for any film involving the Holocaust or any film involving education towards that fact. That's kind of his, not his passion project, but that is kind of his mark on cinema for history. If there was one film that you would say, what was his biggest kind of, not impact, but his biggest kind of call to the world to just sit down and listen, that has to be it. And that is kind of his best film that he has made. At number 4, we move on to Jurassic Park. We'll go for a bit more of a light-hearted movie after talking about Schindler's List again. This film is one that you can just stick on at any time and just go back and watch. It is iconic, almost too iconic to the fact they've made, you know, an entire sequel franchise based off it, even past the original sequels, that it was there. You know you've got a good thing when they make, you know, 5 films afterwards and there's no signs of them really stopping. Trying to recapture the magic of the first film, and nothing ever gets close, because this film is almost perfect in that respect of setting up, you know, the universe around you, capturing imagination, which has always been Spielberg's calling card, and just a whale of a time, whether you're young or old, you can always go back to it. And this film is, even for the effects of its time, timeless. It's just so well done in that respect. Now, my top three shuffled so many times. All three of these films switched at some stage when I was trying to figure it out. So at number 3, I have Raiders, and I still struggled to kind of say, yeah, it's number 3, but I did put it in this order in the end. Raiders is just a phenomenal film. It's just so well made. It's so well paced. It's so well scored. It's so well directed. It's so well acted. It is the classic action adventure film. It's something that inspires people to go out there and have an adventure. It is that kind of magic in a bottle that Steven Spielberg gives out to everyone whenever you go to have a cinema trip with him. It's just timeless, completely timeless. And I think it's got on the top of a lot of lists of greatest films of all time. I know that Empire does one every few years, and I think it tends to top it pretty much every single time they redo it. It's either top 1 or top 2 most of the time.
I feel that episode 5 is always there with Star Wars. When it's fan voted, the Godfather. I think Godfather. There's like a core 5 that always seem to rotate.
But the fact that it's up there is kind of testament to how kind of well it's received across the globe. And like we said, it's inspiring in every single sense of the word. He went in and captured like adventure and told people to, you know, follow Indiana Jones on his kind of merry trails. And number 2, and this is, I think, the highest that anyone's placed it, Catch Me If You Can. I adore this film. I adore everything about this film, from the opening sequence to, you know, the characters that are involved, the fact that it's kind of based off a true life story. I always love those kind of things. Everything about this film is so meticulous and so kind of well just measured. You, even when rewatching, you never quite know when he's going to get caught, if he's going to get caught. It's one of those where even on rewatch, you're like, oh, does he get caught here? I can't remember. Oh, no, okay, no, he escapes. And it's that kind of, that sense of mystery that rides with the film even after multiple viewings, the charisma that comes from Leo, the kind of the stoic nature that comes from Tom Hanks as well in the rival character. It's just a brilliant merit of cinema, and it almost made my number 1 because it's one of those films where every single time it keeps on climbing up higher and higher and higher. In fact, if we watch through all these Spielberg films again, guaranteed it probably climbs to number 1. It's that much of a loved film from my perspective. But my number 1 for my favorite Spielberg film of all time is The Last Crusade. And this is down to not only building on what was already set there with Indiana Jones, but expanding the universe beyond, you know, the love stories that he'd been kind of tied down to in the previous franchise, and pairing up with his dad instead. And having the adventures with Sean Connery as your kind of father who, you know, was also into archaeology and almost kind of inspired you to do what you wanted to do. It's a beautiful tale of, you know, family and heritage and, you know, adventure once again. And it has one of the most perfect film endings of all time. I think Spielberg had learned what he'd gathered from all of his films up until that point, knew what he wanted to do with Indiana Jones, and thought, do you know what? This is The Last Crusade at the time, I want to say. I don't think that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ruins, you know, the ending that this gives us. And I think it's just not only a perfect send-off in that sense of the original trilogy for this character, but also the mystery behind the story, the adventure behind it, the search for the Holy Grail. It's fantastic. It draws you in every single time. I love it. I love its pieces. I think it is his best work.
No, very well done. It's an excellent list. I mean, I've known you quite well, so I knew what was coming and what to expect. But if I just want to really quickly bring it up on the screen as well, so people get a chance to see it in its glory.
Was there anything in there that caught you out?
You know what? I'll be blunt. I knew Catch Me If You Can would be high, but I didn't think it'd be podium places. I thought maybe like 4th or 5th. So
it almost made my number 1. I want to add it is, if we did this list again in a year's time, and I mean Fabelmans could be in there as well. But it's one of those films where I have phenomenal rewatchability value with that.
It's as well. I think it's such a hard way to rank these 10. Like, I'm going to do mine in a minute, but it was so hard because, again, when you've seen is it 32 out of 34, which is incredible as well, and it's so tricky to get it into a 10. It's how do you approach the 10, how do you jump it in, and I love seeing recognition to the ones that might not crop up on a lot. Like, I know West Side Story hasn't been on many lists tonight, but that I think it's the highest it's been is 8th on yours, and I'm in the same mindset as you. If you can check out our review to plug it last week, but you switch that one casting due to performance, not just
Literally
controversy.
One casting decision makes this top
I think
3.
it goes. I think that'd be the same for a lot of people. I think it would have done the same as well. And yeah, it's a shame, but no, it's an excellent list, and I'm glad to be able to get it because the first time I've had you co-hosting one of the ranking videos as well, and now I can finally ask you. It's so much harder to do a top 10 on this stream because you can just keep going, whereas when we're sending them in, it's a timer or times, so you know. But yeah, it's interesting, and I'm going to kind of go into my top 10, which is really tricky to do because I always feel like I'm on the spot when these pop up. I'm just going to have a disclaimer. My top 10 is a combination of the ones I respect, the ones I enjoy, i.e. favorites, and what I believe are the best. Because I think it might surprise a few people, some of these. And if I'm going to kick out number 10 with Close Encounters, one of the earliest ones we've done all the way back. And I'm not going to lie, like, it was out of this and West Side Story. And I was really struggling. And I was like, you know what? Close Encounters it's a film I've only seen once. I've seen West Side Story twice, but there's something about Close Encounters where I'm just drawn back to it. I don't know if it's the music. I don't know if it's that incredible Spielberg interview, if anyone's ever seen it, where he's like, there's some, I don't know the interview's name, but he basically says Spielberg, like, your mother was a musician and your father was the engineer, and it's music that connected us to the spaceship. Or if anyone's ever seen an interview, you know what I mean. And I think it's so important to his career. This is probably why it's edged West Side Story for me. And I think this is indicative of what is to come from science fiction. That we know, we speak about so many great sci-fi films across tonight so far. I think Close Encounters is a mighty first step in him building towards that as time went by. Number 9, joining Tom Woods with some love for Empire of the Sun. This is a film that I'd wanted to watch for years, that I'd owned for years, I never got around to seeing. And listening to Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors of all time. I wanted to see it for that reason, but when you've got like John Malkovich popping up, I love these, because it's not, when I think of war film, I think of action war film, not the dramatic side of things. And I loved that we took the innocent perspective of a young person in a prisoner of war, in the Pacific side of things as well. That isn't just a torturous prisoner of war film. It's something completely different. And I just sort of fell in love with this. And it was amazing to see young Christian Bale and Spielberg in that mid to late 80s delving into those dramas. And it's just stuck with me and resonated with me for the months and months. This was like a locked-in top 10 a couple of months ago. And number 8, one that I thought could have been higher, but it's not, is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I adore this film. I think when we did the review for it, I think I said I prefer this over Raiders, which is incorrect, which we'll see soon. This is probably the one I would watch the most. It's nothing against its quality. It's just lower. It's the other ones above it. And I just love this film. One of the greatest endings of all time had it ended with the third film, which probably doesn't disenchant anything, doesn't make it lower because there was a fourth and going to be a fifth. It's got Sean Connery, it's got everything you want. It's so much fun. It's so much adventure. And I absolutely love it. I always have a laugh of it. But what might surprise people is number 7, I've got War of the Worlds. Now, the first Spielberg film I saw at the cinema, I've got a deep connection to. One of my favorite actors in Tom Cruise. It's science fiction. The tripod sound effect is one of my favorite sound effects ever put to screen. And kind of as well in terms of the review we did, it was one of the few where we've had 4 people in the video, and we know they can be longer. There was myself, Sam, Paul, and Tom. There's been a lot of incredible discussions over the last year, but that one in particular, when it's longer than the film, which is a rule we tend to avoid, is reviews longer than films. That was just an incredible discussion. I think what I've found is there's not new respect for it, but when when I'm not watching it on my 9th birthday in 2005, I don't understand 9/11. I don't understand the concept and how this film has been made, but what I sort of learned about the film, it's just given me that much further respect for it. And yeah, superb. Number 6, I've got Raiders of the Lost Ark. absolutely love Raiders. I said it might not be as enjoyable. It might not be as rewatchable as Indiana Jones Last Crusade. Not that it isn't. It definitely is rewatchable. But I think this is the superior one in terms of the craft, in terms of the filmmaking. And, 1981, Mr. George Lucas has just done Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, and him collaborating with Spielberg. Like, I would love that to happen one day. I don't know what two directors it would ever be. It's an immaculate question. There's probably no incorrect answer. It's like if two filmmakers came together to create one of the greatest IPs you had, the
you go Nolan and Villeneuve,
Denis Villeneuve
right?
for me.
Yeah.
For me, and it's like I couldn't imagine those two banding together and then creating one of the most iconic characters in history. And it's George Lucas, and Lucas needed Spielberg. That Spielberg needed the creator in George Lucas to make this, and George Lucas needed the quality and precision that Spielberg brings to it. And I think their pairing is one of the greatest. And adding John Williams, you're not going anywhere wrong. It's a shame it's sixth, but honestly, this is where it gets really tough. Like, to me, first place to sixth place is very tough to go through, and fifth place even surprised me. I've got Jurassic Park, which I was whimper saying it's in fifth because it's ended up lower than I thought it was. Listen, there's nothing I can add to discuss this film that no one has already spoke about. It's one of the most important films in regards to visual effects, where the industry moved forwards to, what it was able to do, what came from it. I recommend the ILM documentary for anyone that didn't get a chance to see it earlier this year. There's a big chunk of it on episode 6. And it's just it's so joyful, no matter how terrifying it can be. It's just a filmmaker at his absolute peak, dropping 2 films in the same year. One of them, this, the other one, Schindler's List, and I still don't know how he did it, and I'll never know how he did it. And it's just a credit to Steven Spielberg that only Steven Spielberg could have made Jurassic Park. I don't think any filmmaker in history could have ever done that first film. And maybe the big surprise is number 4. And I put Minority Report. Now this is blowing my mind. So I loved this film before. I remember there's a great review, Tom Woods again and Paul Klein on that one. And I saw it many years ago. It's always resonated with me, the concept, and it's that, like, the ethics behind it has always been a fascinating point. And when I watched it as a part of this series, every sort of week or two comes by, like, I'm just going back to it, like Minority Report in my head, like going back to Minority Report. And I don't think it's just because of Top Gun Maverick coming out this year and the Tom Cruise hype's in, but I'm so drawn to the idea and the concepts of it. And I think maybe it's representative of the time we're living in, without getting to like politics and stuff. But Minority Report sort of hit me quite hard, and kind of how Tom spoke about with AI, like this was like 7th on my list. And as we got further and further, I was like, no, this is getting higher and higher on my ranking now. And everything about it, I just love. And I kind of wish it's in the top 3, but it's not. And it's, there's just something about this film where I think it'll be one every time you watch it, it'll improve in its own way. Even like Colin Farrell, who's had one of the best years an actor can have this year, in such a small supporting role, and he's such a great welcome addition. And I think this is Tom Cruise at his absolute like peak. Like when he's getting, he's worked with some of the best actors in history. There's a long list of them. But him and Spielberg, it's a shame it was only 2, and it would only be 2. And just what they were able to do with those 2 films, I think is incredible. Number 3, controversial. This is my favorite Steven Spielberg film, so you might be crying that it's number 3. Saving Private Ryan. This won't come as a surprise to anybody who's sort of known what I'm into in regards to, like, I speak a lot about like modern history on videos when I get the chance to. I still haven't seen All Quiet on the Western Front, Tate. I know you have in that video, and I will watch it by the time the year's done. And even like on Andor, I've been talking about stuff like this. And Saving Private Ryan to me is the game changer of war films. It was the first time where we could see the visual horrors of war that isn't just, non-battle stuff or thematics, but seeing these action sequences, seeing the length of them. These went on for longer and longer in real life, people. And I still can't comprehend how it's not just the opening 20 minutes, but I struggle to comprehend how this film was made as a film. We're lucky we had Band of Brothers in the Pacific that followed, and that followed because of Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg working together. And I just can't wait for what comes next. And one of my favorite films of all time, the greatest war film of all time, that and Dunkirk are sat on my 1 and 2 respectively. And yeah, just unbelievable. And the cast as well. seeing the young actors and the careers they've gone on to have, some of the middle-aged actors that went on to have incredible careers that pop up in it, it's just Spielberg at his A game, and it's the sort of film that everyone wanted to be in. And moving on to number 2, I would call this the best film I've ever seen in my life. Now, I know we were running an awards program like a year or two ago, and we obviously didn't finish it, and it would have ended with the best film I've ever seen, and I'd have given it to Schindler's List because it's a film that I thought I'd only see once in my life, and I've ended up seeing it twice. The second one was for this series, but watching it in tandem with Spielberg's career, not just the tough not behind the scenes, but not even the making of this film, the real life side of the film can prepare for what it is. And I can't comprehend him putting this first because there's something for me comfortable about this being at the top of my list. I don't think anyone's had it first today, actually. Now I'm saying that aloud. But it has to be there because to me, it is that film of his that it wasn't just the fact it won him an Oscar. That's sort of irrelevant to the side of it. He called taking a salary like blood money for it. It's one of the most important films a person can ever watch. And where we are today, getting contextual, certain anti-Semites, I'm not going to name them, but obviously one of them's been in the news more than any other. You forget about this kind of thing, and this needs to be not just compulsory viewing, but the education on stuff like the Holocaust. It's so essential, and this film is like a horrific deep dive into it, and it's so horrific because it was real. It is a horror film in that respect, and I just genuinely believe it's the best I've ever seen. From choosing to shoot in black and white to help it age better, to have the real life survivors in the film as well. It's a very important one. And do not just to plug videos, but do check out me and Tom's discussion because that was probably in the 7 years I've been doing this, that's the toughest video I've ever had to record. And number 1, trying to lighten the mood, is Jaws. You're smiling because you know how much I hate sharks. I'm scared of sharks, and how much this film sort of ruined my life. And the reason I've kind of put this number 1 because it was sort of my top 3 was locked in of Jaws, Schindler's List, and Saving Private Ryan. And I had Saving Private Ryan 1, Jaws 3rd at one point, and I just thought we don't get to do this series, we don't get to do this video without Jaws. It created the blockbusters. Let's take the quality of the film aside, and its quality is unbelievable. It is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life, and it's so torturous that it's not a film I can go out and see. I didn't do the IMAX re-release as much as I wanted to. I couldn't bear to see it at a cinema. You've got your John Williams score, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. You've got the visuals of this, the fact that Spielberg's called it the hardest one of his career. What comes from that? The shark. We all know about the damaged sharks, mechanical sharks. So we create the most horrifying, fear-inducing character of all time by making it POV for the entire thing, and unbelievable performances, an incredible script, and it's Spielberg's 3rd film. And we owe everything that followed down to this. As I said, blockbuster cinema. We spoke about him and George Lucas banding together. Without Jaws, I don't even think we get started, if I'm being honest with you. That's how important Jaws was for the industry. And yes, it is just... It had to be number 1 for me because I genuinely believe like this is on a par with Schindler's and Saving Private Ryan and Jurassic Park in terms of its quality. But there's just something about the Jaws that just edged it. Maybe it's because it's horrified me. It's ruined such a large part of my life. I have that sort of fearful respect. In Jurassic Park, it's a terrible analogy where, before he gets killed, he says, "Clever girl," the guy at the park. That's kind of me putting Jaws at number 1 on this list. That someone had told me 35 weeks ago, you'd put Jaws at your number 1. I'd have sort of laughed at them. But now, I'm looking at this as a whole series, as a whole career. I think Jaws has to be at number 1 for me. And it's well earned in being there for all the reasons I listed and many more. It's so I'm looking at the post now on my screen, and it's still sort of making me a bit uncomfortable, if I'm being honest with you.
Let's pull it up.
And that's kind of it. What do you think? Because I'd be curious now if you were surprised by that or not, because there's something weird about it, isn't there?
There's 2 things that surprised me on this list. First of all, is Minority Report being so high. I didn't realize that you liked it that much. I think it was very similar kind of sentiments towards Catch Me If You Can on my list, of it being kind of a high up film that kind of creeps up and keeps on creeping up upon rewatch. It's a fantastic film in its own right. And the other one is George, the person who hates sharks, putting Jaws at number 1. is always going to be a classic, I think, for the channel moving forward.
It's that respect, right? It's that respect I have for it that it's like ruined me.
Was it you've got to become what you fear the most?
Yeah, but or is it like, I don't want to call it arrogance, but you know, is it arrogance to have the film that's like destroyed a lot of your life as your number one? Because I always moan about horror films. I don't get scared by horror films. That's not an arrogant thing to say. It's to me that
Jaws is a horror film and it scares you.
Yeah, and like because I saw that at such a young age, it had such a profound impact on me. I everything pales in comparison to that. And yeah, it had to be there. You know, the more I think about it, and I thought this were a good few weeks as well. It just kept saying it's like Jaws should be number one. It didn't look right being in second or third place on my list, and in turn, you know, Saving Private Ryan coming third is a surprise to me because I said it is my favorite film of his. But fourth place, Minority Report, like that just kept creeping up and up and up, and I've got a long time for
doing that. I think that
I want to rewatch it now. I didn't rewatch a single Spielberg film in lieu of doing all this. I really want to show my dad Indiana Jones because he's never seen them. I was like, I'm gonna do it next year. I'm not going to rewatch any of these. I didn't do the cinema trips for E.T. or Jaws. I did it in order, and it was tough, but it was more satisfying. But yeah, that's my top 10. That rounds out all the top 10. So we had 12. And what we're going to do for everybody at home, we're going to do the countdown now. So we have 24 positions on this grid. So any films that drew, we put together. They're not separated by who's been higher on the most. It is just a chronological order of release date. It made it easier for scheduling, and we're not into that sort of thing. So we've got 24 films we're going to count down from. We'll say the number, where it ranks, the points, and then the film. Tate, I know you've not done this side of it before. It's harder to do than it really should be.
Okay.
But over to you first. What is 24th?
Okay, so at number 24, we have a bunch of films. These are the films that sadly have placed at the very, very bottom. So these are the films that have 0 votes. I wonder if anyone can guess them at home before I put them up on the screen. You can pause your video now and just go for a guess. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Here they are. So Sugarland Express, 1941, Twilight Zone the movie, Always, The Adventures of Tintin, BFG, and The Post. I'll be honest, the only one on there which I think doesn't deserve to be on there is Sugarland. From those, I quite enjoyed it, and I would have placed it higher.
What's fair to say that I should have said before, these are just ones that haven't got into any individual person's top 10. And certainly for this, there's to me 1, 2, 3 films there, Sugarland, Tintin, and The Post. They are not films that I think are bad films at all.
No.
The Post is a very, very good film. But I understand why not a single person would ever have this in their top 10 Spielberg films. Tintin, I think, is a phenomenal achievement in the advancement of CGI, and it will have. I know it has its fans, but it is a film that I certainly have more respect for than enjoyment. And it's just struggling. I mean, it feels like so long ago. I feel like I should watch it again because I always felt like I was quite harsh on it when it came out. I know you liked it a lot more than me, but
I enjoyed it. It was honestly, if we're talking about our lists, it was my 11th, 12th, or 13th. It was in that range. So it was very close to jumping inside. But when on review, it was like, is it better than Bridge of Spies? No, it just misses out.
Exactly. And that's, again, you know, we spoke about having a top 15 a lot, but that is understandable that this does happen. And kind of in lieu of that, in 23rd place with 2 points, we have Munich. Again, another one that was a tricky review when me, you, and Elliot did that. But again, it's, you know, what is going to jump into that? And I love Paul's analogy from the various videos we did where he calls it his Spielberg Post 9/11 trilogy. So do check out a couple of them.
At number 22, we have Warhorse, a fantastic World War I film. I actually quite enjoyed it on rewatch. And it's nice to see that it did actually end up, you know, actually scoring points and not in the bottom set.
Definitely that. And in line of that as well, in 21st place with 4 points, we have Amistad. Again, a film I'm, you know, the beauty of doing this is when the videos came in, I'm like, yes, like a film is on the board. The goal is to have as few as possible on 0 points. And we achieved that. And it's lovely to just get some recognition.
I agree. Very happy to see Amistad getting some points. Really enjoyed that film. And in 20th place, we have West Side Story. Oh, what a difference one casting could have made. I think this would have been a lot higher up if they changed the lead actor.
I'm with you on that. Considering it's got an Oscar-winning actress in the film. I think this will be one that ages very well as the years go by. We spoke about that to plug last week again, but it was a really fun review, and it was great to sort of revisit it just under a year on. And in line with that, in 19th place with 7 points, we have The Terminal. One that I think surprised you, cropping up a few times, but
yes,
it's got its fans, and I can see again some of these lower down ones that have points. They sort of sneak into the lists, and I can certainly understand why The Terminal did sneak in. It was actually behind the scenes. Aside from Jurassic Park, this was our most requested video for people to be on for the entire series.
Fantastic. It's very interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of the film myself, but I can absolutely understand why people would be drawn to it, and it places in 19th. Now we have a load of films at 18th place, a load of films drawing. So we have Duel, Jurassic Park, The Lost World, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and Lincoln. I personally think this is a weird spread of films on the same amount of points here. I'm going to throw my personal opinion in here. Duel should not be on par with these other films.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to the point system, I guess. I don't mind it, but Duel has cropped up on, I think, 4 different lists. I think Duel ended up coming up on, whereas the other 3 were one each. And hey, that's the power of the point system, that the ones that are higher up, they get that further achievement from you. And there's just something kind of hilarious about Daniel Lewis being on the same page as the Crystal Skull. But yes, Duel, I kind of wish again, had it been a top 15, I think Duel would have been a lot higher.
100%, yeah.
But this is it, and this is why I hope we've spoke glowing about this. Go check the film out, check our review out, and I hope people get to enjoy it. And with number 17 with 12 points, The Color Purple. Again, it popped up on one list from Rhys, but very high, and I think this is also one that's not indicative of its quality. And the way we've all spoke about Schindler's List tonight, that it was on the list, but no one can sit here and say they enjoy the film. I feel that resonates with a few of his other ones, and The Color Purple's probably Color Purple and Amistad are the other two that really jumped to my mind in terms of subject matter. And I can understand why this is a bit low down than some might think.
Yes, but once again, both those films fantastic, and glad they got some good representation on the points. Let's move on to number 16. We have Ready Player One on 13 points. Very interesting. It's one of those controversial films. A lot of people like it, a lot of people dislike it. I personally side on the air of liking it, so I'm happy to see that it got well, or did well on the list. And yeah, very interesting that it is placed pretty much almost bang slap in the middle of all of the films.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And I think because it's still quite new, and as you said, it's the concept that I think turns people off. And what I would kind of argue now is, in 2018, the concept of Easter eggs is not as horrifically done as it is now. Like, every single film is paused at every single shot for people to scan, whereas this was just a great video game. It's probably like the best video game film that's not actually based off a video game. I feel like that's been said before about something else. It's really obvious that I've forgotten, but yeah, it's one
I don't know, Tron, I guess, but Tron was
Tron Legacy. I feel like there's a glaringly obvious other one that came out recently, in the last year or two, that I've forgotten about, but I'm not going to harp on it. But in 15th place, we have another draw. We have Empire of the Sun and Bridge of Spies, both sitting on 14 points. I quite like this. Again, Bridge of Spies cropped up on a few lists. Empire of the Sun, mainly me and Tom. That would make a very interesting double bill. I don't know what it is, but I've just got to say, I love the poster designs of both of these. There's something we've not been able to speak about in the series, and it is really random stuff. I'm not going to delve on, but just the poster designs across his entire career, just outstanding. I know that modern film posters lack compared to older ones, but just there's this unreal consistency, and I love that, Fabelmans is a great one for when we get to talk about that in the future.
Yeah, no, both fantastic films, both historical films as well, which is very interesting. Focusing on different parts of history, different wars in history as well. Fascinating character pieces both as well. So very interesting that those two films paralleled each other at different points in his career. George, not sure if you're going to be happy or sad about this one, but number 14 is War of the Worlds. I know that you wished that it would have been a little bit higher up, but at least it did very well on the list. It got a load of people voting for it across all the videos, so really good.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that path that I get why. I think it was in maybe 5 lists, maybe, but 5 or 6. But I understand why it is nearer like the top end, i.e., your tens, because the quality of the film's above it, and I just think it's great that this got. I didn't think it was going to get this high. I thought like, oh, George is going to be the only idiot that's put it on his list. And I think I had it. Oh God, was it 7th on mine? Yeah, it was 7th. But a lot of other people, put it forwards, and I'm glad that this might be a film as the years go by, people maybe revisit it a little bit more. And one that's cropped up higher is in 13th place with 23 points. By the way, can we just say we're on 13th place and we're on 23 points, which feels like nothing, but I think it is worth mentioning.
Top heavy.
The top end is top heavy, and I think it was worth saying that because Spielberg has done 34 films that could have been up for this, there's a very wide spread compared to the other series and other ones we've done, which hand it to themselves to it so much more. And 13th is Hook, a film we've hardly spoken about, a film that it popped up on 2 lists, but it's got a lot of love. And I think it's another one that I think there's a certain generation that just grew up with this, didn't they? Is their Peter Pan film.
Without mentioning it being a Spielberg film, it's kind of considered to be a timeless classic for kind of kids or family films and stuff like that. It's my personal go-to when wanting to watch a Peter Pan film. And it's just one of those Spielberg magic films. You get that Spielberg magic thrown into that kind of that property, and that's what happens. That's what comes out. At number 12, we have AI, Artificial Intelligence, a great sci-fi film. Really loved it on rewatch once again, and good to see that it's done really well on its points as well.
Yeah, definitely. And as I kind of said, those concepts that we've not really had before, like AI is far more of a thing in 2022 than 2001. And obviously this, of course, being a big part of the Stanley Kubrick stuff with Spielberg, made out of respect for him in that same vein. It's really interesting for people if they get the chance to rewatch. And now we're going to get tricky. Now things are going to get tough. So we got a top 10 to get to, but there's always that one film that missed out in the top 10. And even I felt bad, and I thought this might have snuck into the top 10, but it hasn't. In 11th place with 40 points, Catch Me If You Can. And now we're starting to see a bit more of a jump up as well in the point zones from what was there before. There's a big gap here, but yeah, Tate, how do you feel? Good.
Well, if only I placed it at number 1, it would have made it into the top 10. No, I think it's a fantastic film, and I think it's well respected on this list. I don't mind it being outside the top 10 because it's second in my own personal one. I have my own kind of personal opinion on this film, but I think it's one of those where, for those who haven't rewatched it recently, go back and watch it again. It is fascinating to watch. It is a fantastic rewatch, and also the review on it was really well done for the people who were on it. So moving on, number 10, the big top 10, Minority Report, 45 points. I genuinely, after watching all of the votes of people coming in, Minority Report kept on coming up as quite a high number on people's lists. I'm actually surprised this wasn't higher, based on what people submitted today.
Yeah, because when it cropped up, I know it's higher than Catch Me If You Can, but it was in like the middle zones. It wasn't like people were putting it 10th or 9th. It was sort of like, I know that Paul had it 3rd, myself 4th, but it sort of popped up in 6th or 7th a lot. But things get very tight over the next 3 slots. There's like 3 points difference, which is we've not had this. I don't think in any of these ranking videos where we've had entries as tight as this one today, sort of teeing up where the top 10 goes. But I love the fact that Minority Report has got in the top 10 and and kind of what follows it, which I'd say thanks to Charlie, not in a passive aggressive way, in case it sounded like that wasn't my intention. E.T., which no one has spoken about, is in 9th on 46. I mean, so no one spoke about Corstev because it's in the ranking, but 1 point over Minority Report. And this is kind of the big thing with Charlie, that if it wasn't that high, and this is where, obviously, we are just 12 people that have submitted top 10s. There are millions and millions. This was the highest grossing film in the world for many years. And it's completely understandable as to why this has a place in the top 10. And I just think it's one that I really enjoyed revisiting earlier this year, but I can see why it's sitting in that lower section of the top 10.
But
it should have...
I was going to say, it's so fascinating because it has such a deep embedded kind of place in pop culture, and its influence is echoed into like TV series like Stranger Things nowadays, where a lot of the elements from the film are pretty much copied, almost carbon copied for it. Replace like, you know, E.T. with L, and that's kind of it. Literally replace one letter, and you've got Stranger Things,
Goonies and E.T.
Yep, Goonies and E.T. That's what it rides off. But it's the first of our classics to end up on the list. So to make it into the top 10, to have the classic, you know, what we would consider to be the classics in there is brilliant. Break it up, though, as they haven't actually cropped up yet, will be the Indiana Jones films. And the first one is the Temple of Doom. Very interesting that this would be a very fascinating kind of ranking in general between how people perceive the three Indiana Jones films. We do have, you know, King of the Crystal Skull that's already kind of made the mid-tier of the list. But now we have Temple of Doom as the kind of first of the original trilogy to prop up. What do you think about that being kind of ranked third amongst the original three?
I see it. I see it from a... Cam did a really good point as top 10 about how Temple of Doom stands out in its own by being the more unique of the three. And I think in turn of that, it might not be as enjoyable for some than the others. I think a lot of people clearly enjoyed it, which is why it sits 8th place. And I'd argue that maybe there was some conscience that everyone wanted to put 3 indie films in their top 10, which I think is fair as well. And this sort of sat like 14th on mine when I was looking through my ranking. And I think it's very much should be there. I know obviously that a lot of people have come on and said it's a controversial pick, and I can understand the reasoning behind that. Obviously, me and you did the review for that and we spoke about it, but I think it's very fair, and it probably sits. My ranking for a very long time was Last Crusade, Temple of Doom, and then Raiders, and now it's Raiders, Last Crusade, and Temple of Doom, and I enjoy all 3 of these equally. I think it just depends on my mood of what I want to watch. What about you?
There's a time and a place, I think, for Temple of Doom in kind of watching films. I feel like out of all 3 of them, this is the one where I kind of can turn off my brain the most, and just kind of sit back and just enjoy the adventure and not really care about what's happening on screen too much. Whereas the other 2, I really have to kind of concentrate on the mystery and solve the puzzles. This one's less of a puzzle solver, more of like the straight up adventurer kind of that Indiana Jones is. So that's where I kind of see it amongst the 3.
And kind of following that in 7th place, it's not Indiana Jones, but it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind with 49 points. So just for curiosity's sake, for people at home, that is 4 points between 7th and 10th. And again, Close Encounters is one that I know that Ed had it second on his list, but this cropped up in a lot of people's, and you know, I do have this enigmatic respect for it, that it's clearly a very important film to Spielberg's career, and I think the back-to-back of Jaws and Close Encounters really pushed him onto the career we know he'd have. And I remember when we done 1941 review, we kind of both sort of laughed that 1941's like this horrific sandwich where it's got Close Encounters and Jaws on one side and Raiders and E.T. on the other. And then 1941's just sat in the middle, but Close Encounters is very, very much deserving in being this. And one thing I love to say is that we've had a lot of science fiction fans across the series. And I know that Spielberg's a massive advocate of sci-fi, which, you know, brings on some of these people that can talk about it. And it was just great to go to this earlier on in the year.
Well, I was going to say, it's an absolute classic film from start to finish. And it's one that has stood the test of time, which, you know, when I first watched it when I was younger, I kind of did think, oh, I enjoy this film. This is fun. But I did think, will I enjoy it when I'm older? And it is one of those where it's like, yeah, actually, you're going to enjoy it more because you're going to kind of pick up on things, you're going to understand more, and you're going to really kind of lean into the sci-fi elements more. So, no, absolutely adore Close Encounters and glad that it made it in at number 7. We move on, though, to number 6, which is Saving Private Ryan, a huge jump in points, moving to 95 points. So these are now the big hitters. These are the ones which everyone's placing in their lists, or everyone's placing their top of their lists. Fascinating. I thought when we first started doing this list, this would be in the top 3. So I'm just not baffled, but it does, you know, it gets me that it's in 6th place.
Yeah, I know. I mean, listen, this is one of my favorite films ever made, let alone my favorite Spielberg film, and I can understand it that not everybody. I don't think not everyone's into war films. That sounds really unfair, but I think with Spielberg, although he won the Oscar for this, I think in terms of what people have grown up with, what they might have had a history with, I've never really believed Saving Private Ryan is one that can stand up to some of the others in a really respectful tone. again, for me, I'm a bit different. I was a bit of a history nerd at school, but I think it's fair. I mean, listen, 90% of the directors, this will be number one, right? But Steven Spielberg, this ends up sixth, which says a lot about the incredible career he's had.
Yeah.
And maybe another surprise to the system, if Saving Private Ryan is sixth wasn't a surprise, in fifth place with 101 points, 6 points more, we've got Raiders of the Lost Ark, which,
wow.
I mean, I know behind the scenes, when the videos were coming in, I was being quite coy with you. I was like, do you want to know? Do you not want to know? And I was like, things are getting close. And Raiders was quite far down, I'm not going to lie. And then a few of the videos popped up, and then it rightfully climbed its way up, which was fantastic to see. But, if you work out the math by now, you'll know that this isn't the highest ranked Indiana Jones film, which, again, It goes to the enjoyment versus quality debate, and there's no incorrect answer as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think so either. And I mean, we'll just kind of move straight onto it as well, because it didn't beat it by many points, only about 10 points in total. But Last Crusade is our highest ranked Indiana Jones film, which I'm okay with. I mean, I put it as my, number one. I believe it was also number one on another list as well. Trying to remember whose list it was number one on now.
Tom Pickup.
It was on Tom Pickup's. There you go. I think the Indiana Jones films being near the top, it is his biggest franchise, I would say, throughout his entire kind of filmography and history. It's something that people are still going to keep on going back to. I know he's not doing 5, but the fact that it's got to a 5 is fascinating in itself. And the fact that the adventure still continues and people can find new life in these films is brilliant. And it's just kind of rewatching them, going back in them, and enjoying the adventure like over and over again.
There are certain directors where they have these incredible established careers, and there's like one franchise within them. And I don't really look at Jurassic Park as a Steven Spielberg franchise. I look at it as a Steven Spielberg film that became a franchise, whereas like Indiana Jones, like, is his baby with George Lucas. And it's kind of like, you compare it to Nolan, right? Nolan's got the Dark Knight trilogy, and amongst the trilogy, he's got all of his own other films. And I think Denis Villeneuve, Dune's going to be his franchise. We won't see him on another one. And it's really interesting how directors like this, but yes, big fan. And one of the big moments. So we're heading into the top 3 now. And
these are podium places now.
Yeah, and what I thought would have been a massive jump away from 4th, it is not. 1 point higher in 3rd place with 114 is Schindler's List. Now, I'm just going to say it. This needed to be in the top 3.
Yes.
I'm very glad it is. I mean, listen, I wouldn't have minded if Indy did get into the top 3, but I'm glad in this sake that what I believe, and I've said that it is his best of a film, is sat in 3rd, and I completely understand why. For a film that wasn't top of a single person's list and still comes in 3rd, I think it's very impressive.
It's his most important film, and it absolutely deserves to be exactly where it is on the list. It was very difficult for, I think, anyone to put it as their favorite film, because it's not a film that you would describe as being your favorite. It's absolutely his best film. But of course, like, this is a ranking based on, should we say, biases. We want to put in favoritism. We want to put in, personal kind of love towards certain films. It's very difficult to have a personal love towards Schindler's List as a film, because it is, like we said, such difficult material to handle. And he handles it so expertly. It's truly deserving of all of the acclaim that it has received. A very important film for, not only back then when it was released, but also our times right now, with a lot of hatred rising up in the world. It's just a brutal reminder of what took place and why we must remember and why we must never forget of the actions of the human race. Completely deserving of being in that top 3. We'll move on to our number 2. Jurassic Park, 189 points, a big jump, a fantastic film, a brilliant film that just can be rewatched over and over again, just experiencing the magic of seeing dinosaurs on screen. It spawned franchises. It's, it stood the test of time. The CGI is still, people look back at it and go, wow, that is still, the pinnacle of what we could have got back then. Like, some of the modern stuff looks worse than what we got in this film. Yeah. It's absolutely phenomenal. And what is very fitting, is the fact that we have 2 films from the same year back to back on the list, right next to each other. Either way, Jurassic Park at number 2, just pipping out Schindler's List to number 2.
Yeah, and it kind of, 75 points higher than 3 is a humongous gap, and it's so completely understandable that, you know, what we spoke about for all the reasons why, you know, we think Schindler should be sort of third and it isn't a favorite. This is absolutely the film that is a favorite. It's a film that so many people grew up with. It's dinosaurs. It's dinosaurs on the big screen at cinemas. It's lovable characters. It's got repeat viewing factor. Yes, it became a series as well, so it's lived longer in the memory from the fact it isn't just a solo film. And every time a new one comes out, people go back to the original, which is a sign of how good it is compared to the other ones. I thought this would walk it, if I'm being honest, but it didn't. But again, we are 12 people versus, you know, the history. You know, this is over $1 billion film now. It was the highest grossing film. I think it took out E.T. The fact that Spielberg's like his own film had to take out his other film.
Yeah.
I know James Cameron technically did that with like Avatar taking out Titanic. 189 points. And it was very obvious from early on in the videos coming in that there was a 1 and a 2 and a jump. You know, it's like I guess in football terms, right? It's Liverpool v Man City for the last couple of years, where, you know, they're just third's nowhere in sight. And the one that scrapes it this time, and this hasn't happened in a ranking video yet, and I did genuinely quadruple check the numbers to make sure I don't cock this up. In first place, which you worked out by now, with 190 points, that is 1 point more than second place, is Jaws. This is why, like, for anyone watching that sent in videos, like, I wasn't pushing for them to come back, but I was so excited seeing what everyone was putting, because it was like a boxing fight, like a 1-2. Like, every round it just switched. They just kept overlapping one another. And listen, I had Jaws the top of mine, and it comes from a place of respect alongside the quality. And I can see why a lot of people that aren't me love this film and are massive fans of the film too. And, you know, we're looking at the career of, to me, the greatest director that's ever lived. And I think there's so many incredible options that could have been at the top, but there's some, maybe it's the posters, I don't know. There's just something about Jaws being at the top that sort of is stunning, but at the same time, it is endearing to what the film has done for Steven Spielberg.
Indeed. I think looking back at that kind of top 10 there, and looking back at all of the ones that we've just kind of gone over and all the reviews that we've done over the last year, to have Jaws come out on top is very fitting. It was kind of his big break, his massive break into cinema, expertly crafted from a very early on age. And sure, he went down the line and did films kind of later on, like Jurassic Park, like Schindler's List, like the Indiana Jones franchise, like Saving Private Ryan, that all tested different areas of his cinematic making, all tested different areas of what he could push himself to do as a director. But it all goes back to that number one, which is Jaws, and all goes back to that kind of point where he truly showed himself on the world stage and just kind of, you know, made the first ever blockbuster. He is the reason why films are, you know, still a very popular media nowadays, because of him as the greatest director of all time. And you could easily call it that. I think a few years ago we did consider doing a greatest director battle of the brackets, and it was pretty much going to go down to who was going to get the kind of the dice roll first, who was going to get the first pick, and whoever would have that would easily probably pick Spielberg and walk it. So yeah, no, glad that Jaws ended up winning, and, you know, glad we finally have our official kind of Friends of Cinema Savvy top 10 of the Steven Spielberg films.
Yeah, and this is it. And, you know, again, to plug Letterboxd, we'll have the list on Letterboxd tomorrow. We're not going to put it on tonight in case do people go on Letterboxd to look at lists? I don't know. I use Letterboxd a lot, but it's a very interesting social media site, and you know, that's going to be there. We'll have some updates, but this rounds out a series I said that started in March, a series that began prepping in December last year after going to an empty West Side Story screening. Go check out our review from last week. Sorry. To January, when I remember pitching it, and I was like, yeah, like this would be cool. Like I've done 3 thumbnails, and the next is like I've actually now done 34 thumbnails. And it's kind of been and gone in a flash. Like, it's been a constant across the year, so it feels really surreal to have ended. And I think because we've done big franchises, you know, we did Bond last year, we did Marvel last year, bar Nolan and half of Peter Jackson, we've never really been able to dive into directors, and, you know, just a casual 35 episode series was the one way to do it. And it's been incredible. I'm going to start rounding out with thank yous. Firstly, to everyone at home who's been watching this and making this series possible to do. always has to be the first call of thanks. So thank you for that. A lot of our guests that have popped on have watched other episodes as well. You're never obliged to, but some do, which is it's always really nice to hear as well. It shows that people are invested in the series, for people commenting, for people that have popped up each week in the comments or left us messages or followed us because of this, or people we've got to speak to more because of this show. It doesn't go unnoticed. And I'm going to go for a very long list, so forgive me, Tate. I'm going to thank every single person that has been on an episode. Obviously, yourself, been on 12. I'm not going to list everyone's appearances. Tom Woods, I don't want to smugly laugh. His goal was to be on more than Tate, and at one point he was. But it unfortunately didn't run out. But listen, Tom jumped on so many. He bailed us out in a few of them as well at the last minute, which was incredibly appreciated, especially the Schindler's List one, which is, as I said, the toughest review we've ever done. And I'll jump on and say it was probably one of the hardest ones we've ever had to plan. Cam, Charlie, Elliot, Dave, Neil, Paul, Tom Pickup, and Tom Butler, Rhys, Ed, Sam, Scott, and Jed. I've not missed anyone else. I've wrote that list. Thank you to every single person that has been on. Doesn't matter if it was one episode or 2 or 3 or 8 or 12. Anyone who takes the time out to watch some of these films, to jump on videos in their own time, it does not go appreciated that we get to do this. These series can't function. A 34-episode series certainly wouldn't have lasted as long without people jumping on for them. And I want to give a special thank you to everyone. As I said, not everyone was able to send in videos today, which is completely understandable. But the fact that we're able to bring on so many great people onto this channel, and hopefully we get the chance to speak to in the future, because, we're still we're not a Steven Spielberg podcast per se. This is a retrospective series on our film channel. So that's my sort of thank yous out the way.
Well, very quickly, and I think everyone who is watching this video at this stage, everyone who's been a part of this video at this stage, also wants to send thanks back to you, George, as well, because once again, you have pulled an absolute blind with this one across the entire series. Every single week, putting out a new review to do with Steven Spielberg, all of the planning that goes behind it, all the organization of putting people on for videos, all of the thumbnails, all of the editing, everything in the background. It has taken up so much of your time this year. And alongside the Bond video and all of the other videos we do on the channel, you have been an absolute anchor throughout this year, to kind of making sure the channel runs as smoothly as possible. And yeah, once again, from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of, I'm sure, everyone's hearts who are watching the channel right now, we all want to say thank you so much for all of the effort you put in, because you've done a fantastic job once again, mate.
There is. Thank you. I thought you were going to put the W in before the anchor of the series, and I was really excited then. But no, not just football. No, listen. I enjoyed doing these. I wanted to watch all of his films for a very long time. It's a very selfish series to do, but at the same time, it is pretty much fun as well. And I like editing and stuff like this. The Bond video was like torturous in the most beautiful, torturous way. But it was something I wanted to do, and I think if I don't want to do it, then there's the struggles. And no, listen. Yeah, as I said, you've jumped on a lot. In Austria at the start of the year, you're working in Austria. Obviously, what happened, but you're still jumping on as much as you could, which is appreciated as well. So a massive thank you to anyone that stuck with us throughout this year as well. Believe me, this has been a wild one to put at least in. It's only the 22nd of November this goes up. But as we kind of said, this is the Steven Spielberg retrospective done for now, ... Because the Fabelmans is coming. The UK release date, I believe, is January the 28th or 27th, which is really frustrating.
Do I get it in Austria before you? That's the question.
I'll tell you what, I think it's not going to be available in Austria before. I think it's going to be available on the internet for everyone before the UK. And we do have a thumbnail. So when we do have a review, we're very fortunate. We might have an early review in January at some point. I don't know. There is a Fabelmans thumbnail now. At the time of recording, this video comes out today. The film comes out today in like LA cinemas for like a week, like very, very special cinemas. And then its wide release is at the time of release tomorrow, the 23rd. So maybe you're a big fan of the Fabelmans. Let us know your thoughts on it. We'll have a review as soon as we can. Obviously, in a perfect world, we'd have this episode would have been next week. The Fabelmans would have been
Yes.
this week. But we understand why that isn't the case. And yeah, as I said, it's been a wild year. And if you've liked this series, this will be the farewell before we do the socials. Director retrospectives aren't going away. They're not something we just do on loop, though. We can't just, next week it's like, hey, let's do Martin Scorsese. I know we sort of joked about it, but there is one so far planned for next year, I don't mind saying. I won't reveal the name of it. Obviously, it's November. Me and you're going to have a big update video as we always do in January. We'll probably formally announce it then, but there is at least one director retrospective planned for next year. I've probably teased. I know we've name dropped who that person is today, if you're really curious. There's some big films coming out next year if you really want to figure out. It's not that hard to figure out. And it's someone we've not been able to speak about too much on the channel, which is really cool at the same time. So when there are more details, we'll let you know. 2023, we're starting to plan stuff. This has been 2022. At the time of recording, at the time of this video coming out, the Andor finale is tomorrow. And that rounds off another 10 episode series we've been doing across the last few months. So, yes, thank you to everyone, as I said. And if you haven't done it by now, please comment below with your favourite Steven Spielberg films. Because it's going to be weird not watching them. I've not had to watch one for 2 weeks at home. It's been very weird not watching them. I want to hear from you guys. And as I said, if you tweet us your top 10, if you can DM it to us, or you can tweet it as a reply in our message on the we're premiering the video type message, I will go and make a top 10 artwork like what you've seen throughout the video tonight, and just be nice, because you might have watched a lot of these, and I kind of want to know your top 10s as well, because it's, again, I don't think anyone in the world is going to have the same top 10 for Steven Spielberg, no matter how much they say or try. Ain't going to happen. So as I said, please do comment if you've enjoyed this video. Maybe you've not seen the other episodes in the series. Maybe you've just wanted to jump on for the ranking and you stuck around. There's 34 reviews if you're interested in any. Maybe there's some of your favorites. Maybe they're ones you never heard of, you never seen. I can show you one thing. There's a lot of great people that were helping out throughout all of those. So please do take the time out to have a look. And if you check the links in the description below, we've got links to every single person that has been on these videos across the year, whether it's their Twitter accounts, their YouTube accounts, their podcast pages. Please do look into them and follow them. They are great people. We genuinely wouldn't have them on if that wasn't the case. A lot of time was put into these guys, coming on. It's their spare time like it is ours, and we appreciate every single one of you that jumped on with us. So that's going to round it out for the thank you stuff. And Tate, for whatever videos we have coming up, because my brain's scrambled.
Yes.
I know December's going to be a lot of Netflix stuff, but where are the best places to find us?
Guys, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. That is where we are most active. That is at cinema_savvy. You can find us on Facebook and letterboxd.com. Just type in Cinema Savvy, or actually go into the link in the description because it is all down there. And once again, you can go find us on redbubble.com, where you can pick up a pillow or, a jumper or anything at all and help support out the channel. They always have flash sales on there. So if you sign up to their newsletter, then you can find out, oh, look, it's 10% off t-shirts today, or 30-40% off various different things. So keep an eye out for that, because it really does help out the channel by supporting us. So go do that there. Sadly, no Spielberg merch though.
No, I feel like I should have done something by now, but it's just like getting the autograph was hard enough to try and do, to put in the thumbnail out. But as I said, that's going to do it for tonight's video for the series. Thank you to everyone. As I said, thank yous again for being involved, for watching, for all of that support. It means the world to us. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you like the ranking. I hope you like the top 10. And I hope you like the series. So again, thank you all. And we will see you on the next one, whenever that will be. Take care.